Welcome back, young wizard. Tonight we walk together through the secrets of Azkaban, told slowly and calmly, so you may drift to rest while listening. If you are ready to rest now, subscribe and comment what hour is in your country right now. It is magical to see different people hearing this story at their own time. What you are about to hear began long before most witches and wizards were born, and it hides in plain sight because silence is its first god. There is an island far out in cold water, and from the mainland you cannot find it with a finger on a map or with a telescope on a bright day. The sea keeps its secret well. Currents pull in slow lines, mist folds and refolds the horizon. Gulls cross the grey and keep their voices low, as if even birds respect the rule of quiet here. The rock rises with a simple shape, a steep climb, a crown of walls that do not ask to be admired. No banners, no carvings, only stone that has met many winters and learned how to face the wind without complaint. The first thing you would notice is not a door or a tower. The first thing is the air. It smells of salt, lamp oil, iron, and rain that has not yet fallen. On most days, the light seems one tone darker than you expect, as if the sky is keeping something back. Sound travels oddly. A key turned in a far corridor feels near. A footstep in a yard sounds like it belongs to the stone itself. Even the sea changes its voice as it slaps the outer walls, softer than on other coasts, measured, patient, like breath through pursed lips. Nothing announces itself. Everything continues. People imagine that a place like this must be a maze of tricks, secret stairs, shifting halls, laughing portraits that tattle. The truth is quieter. The power here begins with routine. Boats moor in neat lines, knots are tied the same way every time. Names are written in ink that does not smudge. Doors are checked and then checked again. Lamps are trimmed at the same hour each damp morning, and the glass is wiped with a cloth kept for that purpose and no other. In a place that draws the warmth out of bones, routine is a kind of fire you carry inside your chest. It keeps shape in a world that would like to blur every edge. From the docks to the inner yards, the island feels like a funnel for weather. Spray climbs high in storms and then freezes, making clear teeth along stair lips. Sea wind finds every gap in a cloak and teaches the body to turn sideways at doorways. Ropes go stiff. Hinges bite at bare fingers if you are careless. The men and women on duty move in steady lines. They speak in short sentences and save all extra words for when the kettle sings. They keep dry socks in a pocket that somehow never gets wet. They walk as if the ground could tilt without warning, which it sometimes does when long waves roll under the stone and turn the whole place into a low instrument. It would have been easy for this rock to become something else. A lighthouse, a monastery, an empty ruin for birds and soft green. Instead, it became a prison, not because the stone wished it so. Stones do not wish, but because the wizarding world wanted a far, hard answer to a hard question. Where do you place those who have chosen harm so that others may sleep? The sea offered distance. The weather offered a warning. The walls offered work. People did the rest. They set wards that make apparition and flight useless. They set lines of sight that favor the watcher. They counted, recorded, and learned to accept that comfort would always be small here and must be carried in pockets, not found in rooms. The walls are thick and plain. Windows are narrow and set deep. They allow daylight to enter like measured bread, enough to tell day from night, not enough to invite daydreams. Doors are heavy, locks turn with a sound that settles into the stomach. The floors wear the marks of boots that walk the same paths each hour of each day. There is no tour. There are no plaques with dates and names. There are ledges where gulls rest their feet. There are drains that remember every winter. There are rails that shine in two places and only two places, where hands hold on when the wind tries to take a person off balance. Most witches and wizards will never see this island. They will speak about it in kitchens and in pubs. They will lower their voices on the name. They will use it to end arguments with children who have not done anything wrong, and the children will go quiet, and some of them will sleep better, and some of them will not. The place becomes a thought you can hold in one hand, a far door that only closes, a promise that harm, once caught, will no longer walk among you, a comfort for some, a chill for others. The stone does not care which. It listens to the sea and lets the sea decide the rhythm of its days. When fog drops, the island feels closer to itself. The world beyond the outer wall vanishes. The yard becomes the whole of things. A latch lifted across the courtyard sounds like a word whispered into your ear. The bell at the dock is almost never used, and on fog days even its idea feels too loud. People keep count with lips that do not move. They aim their faces toward the work in front of them. They do not look past the next hinge, the next page, the next cup of tea poured from a blackened kettle. Work is the path. Work is also the anchor. To drift from it is to feel the cold notice you, which no one wants. On rare clear mornings, the horizon draws a clean silver line, and the sky seems flat enough to iron. Sunlight settles on wet stone and makes it shine for a short while. That shine is like a visitor with a strict clock. It leaves before it can make anyone lazy. The gray returns, the wind shifts, the place remembers what it is for. Even on those bright hours, there is no sparkle here, only function. A door opens because someone must go through it. A door closes because it was opened. A page turns because a name must be checked. No gesture is wasted. No step is longer than it needs to be. Some swear that the island hums when the tide hits the southern wall just right. A low note you feel in your ribs rather than hear with your ears. Others say that is only talk, the kind people use to soften hard days. Maybe it is both. Maybe a place like this earns a voice over time. Not a speaking voice, only a tone that tells people when to stop and breathe and count again. If you run your hand along the inner face of the western wall, you will bring it back damp and gritty. If you touch the iron of the older locks, your skin will taste metal for an hour. If you try to find a warm draft, you will fail, and then you will learn to make your own warmth, with tea, with gloves, with the memory of some summer field that survives even here. Because this is a story for rest. We do not hurry to famous escapes or loud nights. We begin with foundations. Sea, stone, wind, work. We begin with small truths that hold up larger ones. A prison is not only the people inside it, it is also the habits of those who guard. It is the balance between safety and mercy. It is the cost that travels home in the eyes of a person who has finished a shift and cannot say why the bed feels like it is breathing. It is the public comfort bought at private price. It is a policy turned into a building, turned into a routine that lasts long after the speeches end. There are debates about whether such a place should exist. There always will be. Some say fear is a poor tool and grows what it feeds upon. Others say fear is honest and keeps doors shut that must stay stead. On the island, those debates make no sound. The only sound is the day continuing, the gull that lands and lifts again, the mop that clears a puddle before someone slips, the soft click of a latch that prefers to be called a click rather than a clang, the deep breath taken before a count, The tea poured, the cup held between both hands, the second sip better than the first. If you stand at the far corner of the main yard when the wind comes from the east, you can hear the sea like a long drum roll. It does not end. It never has. It only rises and falls. The walls know how to lean into it. The people do too. Shoulders round a little, steps set wider, voices drop. A list is read. A list is answered. Names turn into numbers on a page and back into names again. There is comfort in that exchange. It tells you the world is still arranged, even here. It tells you that the door you just checked is as closed as such things can be in an imperfect world, which is to say, closed enough for tonight. Most of the mysteries of this place are simple. Simple is not the same as easy. Simple takes practice. Simple also takes will. The island asks for both, from those who come in chains, from those who carry keys, from those who sign orders far away, and sleep well because a line on a chart says the sea was calm today. The island holds all of that, and it holds more that we will speak of later, softly and in order, so the mind can rest while the story moves. For now, keep a single picture. Cold water, a shape of rock. Walls that neither ask nor apologize. Men and women in coats that close high at the throat. Keys that do not jingle because they are tied down with leather to stop the noise. Lamps that glow the color of weak tea. Footsteps that touch the ground like polite guests. A page, a name. A line crossed through that name with a hand that has signed too many lines. Sleep comes easier when pictures are simple. Let this one be enough. What comes next began with a choice that seemed wise at the time. A bargain made to make fear into a wall thicker than stone. It was a choice that changed the temperature of the air here forever. We will walk toward that choice in the next part. Step by step, and we will keep our voices low as we do. What came next was not a thunderclap. It was a decision that gathered like weather, slow at first, then certain. Far from the island, halls of polished wood held long meetings where voices stayed even and pens scratched out neat lines. Wizards and witches asked what a safe world should do with those who had chosen harm. They asked how to keep the many from fear without turning their backs on the few who might yet be saved. They looked at maps, they listened to reports, and the sea kept breathing in the background like a patient drum. In time, the far rock began to look less like a problem and more like an answer, hard, remote, and plain. Before orders were signed, the island had been a fortress of no fixed purpose. A holdfast that belonged to weather and time. Its walls knew storms and long quiets, and that was enough. The ministry weighed that quiet against the rising unease in towns and in country lanes. People wanted sleep that did not jump at every rumor. They wanted a promise that the worst would be kept far from doors and windows. The island had distance. The island had cold. The island had a shape that discouraged comfort. It met the needs of those who stood over maps and counted risks, and it did not speak up to refuse the task. Stone does not decline work. Stone only receives it. The first crews came with lists and tools, and with a respectful way of walking that told the place they understood the rules of weather. They did not try to make the island pretty. They made it ready. Hinges were set that would not seize in salt air. Doors were hung to close square, even when wind pressed hard across the yard. Steps were cut to a depth that fit a boot, not a slipper. Lamps were placed where they kept shadows from growing long enough to hide a plant. There were wards as well, though no charm was left to carry the whole burden alone. Work of the hand and work of the wand were layered, because each kind of work fails in different ways, and this place could afford neither kind of failure. Councils argued over philosophy with care, but every debate bent toward the same simple goal: reduce harm, keep the worst at a distance that could be trusted, offer a way for trials to mean more than words on parchment. The island would be the weight behind those words, not as a symbol but as a set of rules and routines that changed how the day felt for people far away. A person in a cottage could draw the latch at night and breathe more easily, because there was a hard rock in a cold sea that would not open to anyone who should not walk out. That breath, simple and plain, was the reason the island became a prison rather than a ruin. The conversion proceeded without ceremony, and that was wise. No flags waved, no grand speeches filled the yard. A dock was made to survive rough water. Gutters were cleared to keep ice from cracking corners. Rails were set where a gust could make a fool of a strong person. Records rooms were lined so damp would not chew the edges of law. Keys were issued, and each key had a number, and each number had a place to live when the key was not doing its job. This is how a prison begins, not with a headline, but with a small drawer that closes correctly every time a hand pushes it shut. Inside the walls, the planners set the tone, by what they refused as much as by what they allowed. There would be no grand halls that told lies about dignity. There would be no cells so mean that even a person who had chosen harm would be made less than a person. Light would be narrow and honest. Food would be plain and enough. Clothes would be warm enough to prevent illness and not warm enough to invite luxury. A bed would be a bed, not a punishment, and not a prize. Routines would be the shape of the day, steady as a tide, because in a place that drains joy like heat from a cup, routine is the rope that keeps a mind from slipping. A small staff house took form near the inner yard, with a kettle that never quite cooled and a table with 2 nicks in its edge that everyone learned to avoid. The staff did not think of themselves as jailers, though the world might have chosen that word. They thought of themselves as keepers of order in a place designed to quiet danger. They spoke low. They wrote names with tidy hands. They trained to see both the obvious and the almost. They learned when to speak and when to let silence do a job better than a command. They learned to keep their own warmth without giving too much of it away to a room that would not return it. In the ministry, the ledgers began to reflect the new use. Where a blank space had been, a column appeared, and the column grew rows, and the rows grew dates that paired with ships and tides. Cases that had once waited for softer solutions took on firmer shoulders. The idea that the world was fragile gave way to the idea that the world was guarded, not by glory, but by steadiness. People who disliked the plan did not all dislike the goal. They worried about cold solutions. They worried that distance would make hearts hard. Their worries were not foolish. A society earns lines on its face from the choices it makes, and this choice would leave a mark that could not be rubbed away with warm words and a good harvest. There were protections that had nothing to do with doors. The sea itself was written into the plan. Apparition was made useless within a ring wider than the island by many lengths. Flight was made pointless by winds that were coaxed to shift without pattern. Messages that tried to grow wings found their feathers heavy over that water. Wands worked, but less freely, like singers who must keep to a lower key. The planners were not interested in using power to humiliate. They were interested in using power to prevent harm. A person might still plan. A person might still dream. A person would find those plans and dreams slowed by a place that refused to share its strength. The old fortress learned new manners. Corridors that had once been shaped only by wind and war took on numbers and diagrams. Doors that had been meant to turn a sword now turned a thought back into itself. Courtyards that had once been for drilling tired men became places where feet went in careful circles at set times. Watch points were placed not to dominate, but to notice, because notice prevents more harm than force does. In each change, the tone remained plain, no boast, no flourish, only function that would still make sense on a night when lanterns guttered and everyone was tired, and the sea announced a storm by putting pressure behind many years at once. Some in government called the island a final answer. The wiser ones called it a tool. A tool is only as just as the hand that uses it. Laws would decide who went and why. Courts would sign. Appeals would be heard or not. The island would not decide. It would only hold, and while it held, it would keep the rest of the world from tipping under the weight of fear. That humility in the plan was the closest thing to grace that could be found in such work. It kept pride from turning stone into something crueler than stone. It kept the idea of reform alive in small ways, even as years passed and habits set hard as frost. The first day the prison opened, the sea was rough and the sky was low, which felt correct to those who had labored there. The first arrivals came without spectacle. There were no crowds. There were no thrown word. There were checks and notes and a door that shut with a sound that meant the plan had moved from paper into the world. Some on the staff went home that night and did not sleep, not from fear, but from the awareness that a page had turned. Others slept like stones because the month had been long and the work had been honest. The island did not mark the day with any change at all. It did what it always did. It stood still and let weather decide what kind of noise the night would make. In the weeks that followed, routines thickened like rope that has been pulled many times. Morning counts found their rhythm. The kitchen learned the right heat for pots that never quite stopped steaming. The lamps that fogged at the same hour were wiped at the same minute by hands that soon did not need to think about the motion. In the records room, a line was added at the bottom of each page. The line noted that all doors had been checked and that all checks had been checked in turn. No one applauded that line. No one needed to. The line was not for pride. It was for sleep. The island's change was now complete in all the ways that can be written down. It was less complete in the ways that live under words. A fortress becomes a prison in the air between people, in the way a voice lowers itself at certain names, in the way a person carries a key with pressure where it touches the belt, in the way a window lets in only enough light to prevent people from losing the thread of day. Those are not changes you can point to on a plan. Those are changes you can only hear and smell. Salt on the tongue, iron in the nose, wind that refuses to be kind or unkind and is only itself, tireless and true. From that foundation, judgments would come in steady lines. Some would be wise, some would be errors that would stiffen shoulders for a generation. People in warm rooms, far away, would praise the calm that the island made possible. Others would ask if the price was too high and if fear, once given a home, would make itself too comfortable to leave. The honest answer lived in the middle. The island reduced one kind of harm and risked another. It gave many people good sleep and took warmth from a smaller number. It did not pretend to be more than that. It could not be less. What matters for our quiet walk tonight is that a choice was made. A fortress that once belonged to storms and gulls now belonged to policy. It kept what it kept, and it did so without mood. That is how the world steadies itself in rough water, not with heroes on every pier, but with places that can hold a line without drama. The island became such a place, and in becoming it, it changed the weather inside many minds. Fear still walked in markets and on lanes, but it walked a little slower. and people found that they could speak of danger without feeling that a door was open behind them. A closed door far away can make a kitchen warmer than a new fire can, and for many, that was enough. The decision did not arrive as a single loud moment. It gathered like sea weather. One voice after another agreed that distance and routine were not enough on their own. The island was far and plain and cold. Yet fear is a creature with long legs. It can cross water in the mind, so the ministry looked for a stronger weight to press on danger. They asked what could make the worst heart slow. They asked what could make a plan lose its shape before it even began. They asked how to keep harm quiet without turning the prison into cruelty. The answer they chose was not stone and not law. It was a living God that fed on more than food. There were beings in the world who did not care about gold or praise. They cared about a simpler harvest. They took warmth from the air around a person. They drank from joy and left the cup of memory dry. In old stories, people had hidden from them under blankets that did nothing and behind doors that meant nothing. To stand near them was to feel the best days fade. The ministry made a bargain with such beings. They would circle the island. They would stand at its gates and drift by its windows. They would do what doors alone could not do. They would turn the thought of escape into fog. In return, they would be allowed to feed in a narrow and controlled way. That was the plan. Narrow, controlled. The plan looked tidy on paper. On the day the bargain was struck, the sea pressed in as if it too wished to listen. The air grew thinner and cooler as the first of the new guards arrived. They did not march. They did not speak. They did not carry flags. They moved like cold fronts in a long winter. People who worked on the island felt their own smiles withdraw as if a hand had taken them by the corners and folded them away. Tea tasted dull. A memory of a warm field seemed to slide out of reach. This was not pain. It was absence. A room that had been plain became plainer. A cell that had been a fair outline became a thin box with nothing to grip. The bargain had begun to shape the air. The case for the pact was simple to the people who signed it. The beings would not judge. They did not argue. They were not tempted by clever words. They would not be bribed by a trick. They would not read a letter and change their minds. They only did what they do. They turned hope into a slower thing. They took the shine off a plan. They put a weight on the chest that made running feel pointless before a foot moved. In this way, they could keep the worst of the world where the law had put them. The ministry wrote limits. The ministry wrote rules. The ministry promised oversight. They said the island would not become a place of despair without shape. They said they would measure the cost with care. At first, the signs seemed to support the plan. Counts got easier, the restless went still, the sound of keys drew less attention. The guards who kept records found fewer notes about murmurs at night. A plan that might have been whispered 3 times in a row became a plan that died after the first half sentence. The beings drifted along the outer wall and deep in the inner yards. Their presence made even the gulls fly higher. When mist settled, the island felt like a stone at the bottom of a cold pond. Quiet, heavy, certain. Some in the ministry slept better than they had in years. They looked at the numbers and told each other they had balanced safety with control. But the bargain had a taste that did not show up in a ledger. Warm things left rooms and did not return. A plain meal became a duty with no comfort in it. A letter that should have touched a heart touched only paper. People who worked on the island learned new habits. They put kind thoughts in their pockets like matches kept dry in rain. They learned to call up a small, bright memory and hold it with both hands while they crossed a yard. They learned to pour tea and wait for the second sip before expecting any taste at all. They learned to leave the island with their shoulders squared and their faces simple. If they did not, the cold would follow them inland and sit at their tables and stay. The beings did not hate anyone. They did not love anyone. They noticed only the harvest. The harvest was richest near those who had little left to protect themselves. The harvest was also thick around those whose work kept them moving from door to door. No one wanted to say that out loud. Yet in the staff house, the kettle seemed to take longer to sing. The small laughs that people share at the end of a hard house became shorter. When a person slept, the bed felt flat and still as stone. Dreams were colorless slides that creaked by on a dim projector. Morning came with the same gray light as the morning before. The days were safe. The days were also thinner. From the mainland, the pack looked neat. Fewer troubles were reported. Fewer rumors reached school halls and market lanes. Parents told children that the far place was very far and very firm and very quiet. The truth inside the walls was more complicated. The pact did what it promised. It also asked a price. It asked for a tax on happiness. It asked for a tax on the ability to remember a small good thing and keep it for later. The tax fell heaviest on those who could not choose their place. It also touched those who could. People do not always notice a tax that is taken in small coins. The purse feels light only after many days. Some officials argued for stronger limits. They suggested hours when the beings would be held back from certain corridors. They suggested spaces made warm by charm work, where staff could step for a tea and keep the feeling of the tea. Others argued that even a brief step back would weaken the net. They said a single soft hour could become a crack. They were not wrong about the risk. Neither side was wrong in full. Safety and mercy are ropes that pull in opposite directions. In good weather, the pull can be balanced. In bad weather, one rope bites and leaves a mark that takes years to fade. In quiet moments, a few people asked the question that lurks under every bargain. What happens if the hungry guards decide they prefer a different master? Hunger is not loyal. It obeys its own law. No one said that fear out loud in rooms where minutes were written down. Still, the fear worked like a knot in the shoulder. It did not go away. It kept people honest in small ways. Locks were checked with more care. Names were read with more attention. The island and its bargain trained a kind of steadiness that is not pretty, but is strong. All this time, the walls themselves kept their manners. Stone does not take sides. It holds whatever people put inside it. The doors opened and closed. The steps wore the marks of careful feet. The sea spoke in the same low note when tides hit just right. The island did not declare triumph and did not confess regret. The bargain lived in the air like a new weather front that never fully passed. The people who moved through that weather learned to carry pockets of light, a memory of spring rain. A tune hummed without thinking, a name said kindly when it could be said kindly. These were the small answers that kept the place from tipping all the way into frost. Because this is a story for rest, we do not exaggerate the bargain, and we do not soften it. It held danger still. It also chilled more than its target. It was a choice that made sleep easier for many and harder for some. It was a tool picked up in a fearful age. It stayed in the hand even when fear ebbed, because tools have a way of becoming habits. The ministry promised to watch. The ministry sometimes did watch, and did well. The ministry sometimes forgot to watch, and trusted numbers that felt clean and left out what only a person can feel. The island learned this new normal and settled into it like a ship into a long sea lane. Day by day, count by count, door by door. The pact kept its shape and the air kept its taste. Beyond the walls, the world went on, with markets and schools and births and small jokes told over soup. The distance between those rooms and this rock grew in the hopeful mind. Yet the two places were linked. The quiet of one depended on the chill of the other. The truth of that link is not warm, it is honest. Honesty is another kind of blanket. Thin, maybe, still worth pulling up under the chin. Stone is the first ward. Before any charm was laid, the island taught its own lesson. Weight, grain, patience. The builders listened. They set courses that matched the bedrock instead of fighting it. They left no hollow where wind could sing a crack wider. They packed joints until a fingernail found only a thin, smooth line. In this way, the walls were not placed on the rock. They were invited into it. The seas struck, and the wall hummed back, a low answer, and the force went down into the oldest bones of the island, where force belongs. Salt is the second ward. It lifts from the waves and settles on every edge. It gathers in quiet corners. It creeps into rope and cloth and iron. Most call it a nuisance. On this island, it is part of the design. The warders learned that salt is a keeper of boundaries when you treat it with respect. They brushed it away where it would rot wood or bite metal. They left a film where it would blunt stray workings that tried to ride the air like thistle seeds. They learned the balance. Enough to slow what should be slowed. Not so much that hinges seized or lungs burned. The seas supplied the material. The staff supplied the judgment. The first circle of protections lies underfoot. No one sees it, yet everyone uses it. It is a ring set wider than the outer wall. It says to every quick road that people dream of when fear rises, not here. It does not shout. It does not tangle. It simply resets the idea of distance. A thought that once leapt in a flash must take the long way round. By the time the thought reaches the gate, it has lost its heat. The person who carries it feels the truth in their legs and breath. This is a place that asks the body to be honest about how far away it is. Closer in, the warders laid patterns that do not glitter. They live in the angles of stairs and in the turn of corridors and in the sizes of doors that never quite let a crowd move as one. A room that looks plain is threaded with lines that favor the watcher. A window that seems narrow is a lens for notice rather than a promise of view. None of this is secret in a loud way. It is only a design that treats safety as a craft. The staff walk these lines until they feel them in their feet. They know the 3 places where wind makes a sound like a step. They know the 2 places where a step makes no sound at all. There are marks in the stone that a hurried eye would call scratches. They are not. They are quiet knots that pull the wall tighter together. They are set in pairs and in chains. They are placed where frost lifts at dawn. They are rubbed with simple oils when the air goes harsh. They are renewed on a calendar that is written in sea seasons rather than in months. Morning teams check the first third before tea. Midday teams check the second third when the kettles settle. Evening teams check the last third before the long count. No single person holds the whole. The whole holds itself because many hands keep it in shape. Inside the wards lives a soft dampening. Not a denial, not a mockery, a lowering of pressure. As if a singer with too much volume were guided down to a key that would not shake the glass. In this range, things still work. A mind is still a mind. A will is still a will. Yet sparks that might have leapt from thought to act must walk along the floor like anyone else. This pleases no one who loves drama. It pleases the sea, It pleases the ledgers that care only that a day begins and then ends with the same number of doors shut. Redundancy is the third ward. The island does not trust single points. A lock is strong, and beside it a bar is ready. A bell is sound, and beside it a runner knows the route. A light is steady, and beside it a line of paint leads a boot from one hinge to the next. The map of the place looks plain. The practice of the place is layered. A drill runs on a day when the sea is kind, so that muscle knows what to do when the sea is not. A list is read by a second voice. A key is checked by a second hand. A number is written, then it is spoken. Then it is felt in the quiet of a person who knows whether the room in front of them is full or not without looking up from the page. There are rooms set aside for the care of protections. They are warm and dry and smell like linen and graphite, and a little sea, even so. On the tables are charts that do not brag. They show the island as a nest of threads. They show where the tide presses hardest in winter and where the wind steals the tail of a voice in spring. They show the slow drift of hairline shifts, where stone learns new shapes after storms. Staff trace these with gray pencils and clean erasers. When a line moves more than it should, three voices agree on a small change, and the change is made before the island asks twice. Dawn and dusk are the daily hinges. At dawn, the warders do a circuit that most would call a walk, though it is also a reading. Palms rest on a sill that should be cool and is cool. Eyes pause on a joint that should be dry and is dry. Ears catch a note from the south wall that should be low and is low. At dusk, the same path runs in reverse. The last lamp is trimmed. The last book is closed. The last line is written in a hand that does not rush. These hinges are when the island feels like a held breath. The sea waits, the stone waits, the people wait. Then the breath leaves slowly and the night takes its proper shape. Weather is part of the system rather than an enemy of it. The warders learn the language of wind and tide, the way a gardener learns the voices of birds. An east wind steals words and must be answered with hand signals more than speech. A deep low from the north turns the outer steps to slick slate and must be answered with sand laid before anyone is foolish. A run of soft days tempts lazy checks and must be answered with stricter lists. The island gives warnings. It tightens the skin on the back of the hand. It pushes a sound against the teeth. Those who belong here respect the warnings and adjust without debate. Nothing is absolute. The people who care for the wards say that sentence often. It keeps pride from settling like silt in the mind. A ward can fail if a hinge fails. A hinge can fail if a hand forgets oil. A hand can forget oil if the person who owns it has not slept. So sleep is part of the ward. Tea is part of the ward. Dry socks in the pocket are part of the ward. The small kindnesses that pass between people in a grey place are part of the ward as well. A thank you at the right time steadies a person in the same way a brace steadies a door. The island survives because the wards are human and stone at once. Some protections are old, some are not. The warders keep a practice of small trials. A corner is made a touch safer, then watched for a whole season before the change is copied elsewhere. A corridor is given a gentle turn that steals speed from a reckless foot, then walked at every hour of the day to see if it costs clarity during a count. A new coating is tried on a rail to see if salt will bite through it or slide off. The island rewards this patience. It punishes large plans made in a hurry. It rewards slight improvements repeated without fuss until they become part of the place and people forget there was ever a time before them. There is also the matter of how the wards meet the beings that circle the island. The two systems were taught to respect each other. The lines that keep quick roads from opening do not snare the new guards, because snaring them would be foolish and cruel. The dampening in the air does not try to starve them, because a starving guard is a dangerous thing. The warders drew borders that say, "Here you may do the work that was bargained. Here you may not press into rooms that have been marked for human warmth and recovery." The borders are not perfect, they are checked, they are adjusted. They are held by habit and by the calm weight of people who mean to keep their word. The final ward is attention. A person who has learned the island can feel when a space is right and when it is not. They can stand in a corridor and know that the air is 1 degree wrong. They can open a record and know that a line is missing even when the numbers match. They can look at a face and see that a memory is being held and protected rather than drained. This kind of notice is a craft. It grows slowly. It is taught by example more than by lecture. The island makes such people if you let it. The rush leaves them. The stare sharpens. The shoulders ease. The hands move with care. The voice falls into the key that the walls prefer. All these layers are quiet. None of them will carry a story told at a loud table. Yet they are the reason the loud stories do not happen every week. They keep drama from finding easy purchase. They make this place dull in the healthy way that safe places are dull. A day begins. A day, a door opens and shuts. A list is read and answered. A bell is not rung. A runner does not run. The sea keeps its beat. The stone keeps its patience. The wards keep their shape without reminding anyone to admire them. Morning begins as a change in the color of air. The window gives a thin stripe. It is enough to tell day from night. It is not enough to warm the room. The first breath tastes of stone and salt. The second breath tastes the same. A person wakes because the day is arranged to wake them. A key turns somewhere down a corridor. Boots cross a floor. A latch lifts. The body learns these sounds and sets its clock by them. There is no rush. There is no surprise. There is only the next small thing. Cold sits in the walls like a quiet guest. It does not leave. A blanket helps. It helps in the way a hand helps carry a weight. The weight is still there. The body stays whole by small choices. Feet on the floor. Hands on the edge of the bed. Sit up, stand up, breathe. A person tells themselves a plain sentence. It is morning. That sentence is a tool. It gives shape to the hour. It does not fight the place. It only marks a line that the mind can hold. Light lands on the same stone each day. It makes a pale shape that moves slow. Many learn to count the crawl of that shape. It becomes a clock when clocks are not given. Others count seams in the mortar. Others count breaths between distant steps. The numbers change nothing. Still, the counting keeps a person from sliding. It gives the mind a post to tie a rope around. The rope is thin. It is enough. Food arrives with no fuss. It is plain food. It is warm enough to keep illness away. It is not warm enough to comfort. A cup is set down. A bowl is set down. A person eats because the day says eat now. The taste is soft. The air makes all taste soft. The second spoonful is better than the first. That is a rule that survives even here. Some hold the cup with both hands and wait for the hint of heat to move into the fingers. They do not think of other cups. They think of this one right now because that is safer. Voices pass along the corridor. They are low and steady. A count is taken. The same words, the same answers. Names are not stories here. Names are numbers on a list. The list must match the room. The match gives shape to the day. The shape is the point. It keeps the sea outside. It keeps the wind honest. It keeps the mind inside the lines that let it rest. The air has a taste that touches memory. It makes bright memories pale. It makes loud memories quiet. It does not erase. It thins. A person feels the best days move farther away. This can be feared. It can also be managed. Many learn to keep one small good picture ready. A patch of sun on a kitchen floor. The sound of a gate that squeaks in a kind way. A word said by a kind voice. The picture is held for 10 breaths. Then it is put away like a match kept dry in rain. It is not burned all at once. It is saved. Work happens in small pieces. A blanket is folded. A cup is placed where a cup should be. A floor is kept neat. A body is stretched in slow ways, so joints do not stiffen. These are not grand tasks. They are careful tasks. They keep a person a person. The day does not reward them. The day also does not punish them. The reward is in the shape they give to time. Time with shape is easier to bear than time without shape. Sound carries oddly. A door at the far end can feel near. A drop of water can feel like a drum. A person learns the map of these sounds. They do not name the map. They know when a cart rolls, and when a latch settles, and when a pause means nothing, and when a pause means the count will repeat. To know the map is not to plan a wrong thing. It is to feel less at the mercy of weather inside stone. Sleep comes in two forms. There is the thin sleep that breaks when a key touches a ring. There is the deep sleep that drops like a stone when the body is too tired to ask questions. Many get the thin sleep more than the deep sleep. They learn small tricks that help. The last 5 breaths before lying down are slow and counted. The last look is at a simple shape, a line in the wall, the edge of a shelf, not at the window, not at the door. The mind follows the last look into sleep. Better to give it a straight path. Days stack. The mind can lose edges when days stack. The shape of a week is not a gift here. It must be made. Some mark a tiny scratch in a hidden place and keep the number low. Some fold a corner in the blanket on the first morning and unfold it on the 6th. Some set a rule that the 3rd evening is for a long memory and no other. The rule is kept like a small promise. Kept promises are heat in a cold room. Letters may come or may not come. When they come, the air makes them thin. A person reads them once, and the words feel far. They read them twice, and the words feel nearer. The 3rd reading is the one that reaches the chest. The letter is then folded and placed where the hand can find it without looking. The paper becomes a weight that says, wait, do not drift. There is a link. It is quiet. Visits are rare. They are controlled. They are not the point of the place. Yet when they happen, they leave a trace. A person will sit in a quiet hour and hear a voice that is no longer present. The voice is not clear. It is warm. It does not argue. It says a name in a way that belongs to a life outside. The voice fades. That is fine. It will return in a few days. The mind learns to accept this rhythm. Holding tight makes the voice tear. Holding loosely lets it rise again later. Anger burns fast and leaves a person colder than before. Many learn this early. The air here eats heat. Better to hold a steady fire than a flash. So people trim anger down to size. They turn it into a task. Breathe, count, stretch the hands so the fingers do not throb. Drink the water that has no taste. Place the cup where a cup should be. The task is small. The anger cools. The day goes on. This is not defeat. It is craft. Hope lives in small units. A clean page in the mind. A remembered smell of rain. A line of a song without the whole song. These are not grand. They are enough. A person who waits for a grand hope will starve. A person who accepts small hope will last. Lasting is the work here. Not winning, not proving. Lasting, the day is designed to test this. The answer is to make the day simple and to stay. By afternoon, the body knows the line between hunger and the next plain meal. It knows the line between tired and the next thin sleep. It learns to stand when the legs ask to sit, so that sitting can still feel like a choice. It learns to let the shoulders drop when the door shuts, so the sound does not live in the ribs. These are small lessons. They are the whole school. Evening is the color of stone in water. The light fades. The corridor sounds grow soft. The last check is a series of words said in a tone that does not wake anyone who can be spared awaking. The room holds its chill. The blanket holds a little less of it. Thoughts try to run toward the window. A person turns them back to a simple shape. A line in the wall. The edge of a shelf. The counted breath. The day ends as it began. A change in the color of air. This is not the story of a name. It is the story of what a room does to a person and what a person does back to the room. The room makes time thin. The person makes time into knots on a rope. The room takes heat. The person stores heat in careful places. The room makes memory pale. The person protects a small picture and keeps it bright by not staring too long. This is balance. It is not fair. It is not dramatic. It is how many make it to the next day. The day is made of small agreements. Each one is simple. Together they keep the place from tipping. Food arrives when it should. Paper is carried under covers when rain tries to chew edges. Keys travel on quiet rings that do not jingle. Steps fall where they are meant to fall. None of this sparks a story told at a busy table. All of it is the reason stories are rare here. Routine is the first mercy in a hard place. It is also the first law. A narrow morning is kinder than no morning. Light enters in measured lines that mark the floor and the bunk. The first count follows. Names are answered in steady voices. The words are plain. They are said at the same tone every day. The count is not a threat. It is a shape. A measured shape calms the water in the head. People who must be here learn to dot that shape, carry some weight for them. They hold a little less on their own. The shape does not care who you are on your best day or your worst. It only cares that this room holds this number and that the number matches the page. Food is plain and predictable. This is not an insult. It is a tool. A stew can be served in all weathers. Bread can be counted by loaves and by slices. Tea can be brewed by the bucket. The warmth of it is enough to keep illness from finding thin places. It is not enough to make anyone forget where they are. The kitchen is a quiet engine. Pots go on at the same hour. Knives are kept sharp because a dull knife wastes energy. Worktops are clean. There is no glory in it. There is pride in neat work done in a gray room. Letters are handled with care and with rules. They move through a small chain of hands that know the value of paper with a voice on it. Damp is kept out. Heat is kept away from ink. The pages are folded and carried and returned by people who do not raise hopes or crush them by how they hold the stack. When a letter reaches a room, the reader is given a span that is long enough to feel the words and short enough to keep the day in its lane. No one is rushed. No one is left to drift into a long quiet that would make the night harder. People learn to read in steps. The first reading is for the eyes. The second is for the chest. The third is to set the paper down and find the next small thing. Time between counts is divided into tasks. These are not invented to keep hands busy. They are chosen to make a mind hold onto a thread. Floors are swept. Bedding is set square. A small wash is managed and hung where it will dry, even in the damp light. The point is not a shine. The point is order that can be seen. Order asks nothing clever of a person. It answers the question that noise puts in the head. The question is, what now? The answer is this, and then this. A clear task is a bridge from 1 hour to the next. Movement in the yards goes by weather and by plan. A route is walked that keeps notice easy. A pace is set that lets breath settle rather than rise. People learn to keep their eyes on their own feet and the line of stone in front of them. They are not forced to lower their gaze. They are taught to rest their attention where it will not snag. There are places where the wind takes words and people use hands instead of voices. Thumbs up, palms down, a small tilt of the head that means left. This is faster than speech in bad weather. It is quieter in good weather. Quiet is not a moral here. It is a tool. Visits, when they happen, are part of routine rather than a puncture in it. Times are set that do not move. Spaces are kept that are plain on purpose. There are chairs that do not scrape. There is a small pane between voices that keeps the air with its taste on one side and the air with another taste on the other. The time is enough to carry a true word and to feel it. It is not so long that the goodbye becomes a tearing. The person who returns to their room is not expected to be the same in the next minute. A short span is left open for breath to settle. Then the rope of the day is held again, and the next knot is in sight. The staff keep their own routines like armor that weighs nothing. Warm layers are set near the door, where hands can end them in the dark. A pair of dry socks lives in a pocket that never gets wet. A pencil rides in the same place so that a hand can find it while the eyes stay on a corridor. A mug is always placed upside down to keep dust and air from stealing taste. These are tiny customs. They save energy that would cost more than people think. Energy saved is will saved. Will saved is safety earned. Checks are done without hurry and without drift. A check that is rushed is a story waiting to be told later in a voice that shakes. A check that is done with ceremony becomes theater. Neither belongs here. A door is tested and the hand feels the way it sits. A hinge is listened to with the ear and with the small bones in the wrist. A lock is turned and the mind notes both the sound and the feel and the way the bar settles. If two things disagree, the check is repeated. If the disagreement stays, the line is written in a book that is checked by a second pair of eyes before the kettle has time to come fully to a boil. Health is part of routine. People are watched for the small signs that the place is taking more than it should. A voice that flattens beyond the tone that everyone has here. A stare that rests too long on nothing. A posture that gives up its shape. There are rooms set aside where warmth is real and not borrowed from a memory. A chair sits by a lamp that has the good light. A clean blanket is kept heavier than the rest to tell the nerves a different story. Cups of sweet tea do not fix the air. They fix the person enough that the air must work harder to take what it wants. It may sound small. It is not. The beings that guard the perimeter move in their own slow pattern. The routine accounts for them without naming them at every turn. Roots bend where their presence is thick. Schedules set human work in lanes where the air takes less from it. There are spaces shielded by simple charms where a person can store a bright picture without the picture fading. These spaces are not many. They are enough. People who work here use them on a clock. They do not wait until they feel thin. They step in while they still feel strong. A stitch in time is a phrase that belongs to cloth. It belongs to this place too. Discipline is kept soft in tone and firm in shape. A rule is a straight line. It does not need to be spoken with a hard voice to be real. When a line is crossed, the response is measured. It is the same on Tuesday as it was on Monday. It is the same in rain as it was in fog. Predictability is not a kindness in the way of chocolates and flowers. It is a kindness in the way of planks that do not break when a person puts weight on them. Everyone learns that the floor will hold. A floor that holds is something to build sleep on. Night routine is where the day proves itself. Lights drop to the same level. Voices fall to the same key. The last count is read at the same pace. The walk that follows is done with the same step and the same pause at the same doors. Some people are already asleep. Some are nearly there. The walk is shaped to keep both groups safe. Shoes go quiet. Keys rest. A book closes. You can feel the island lean into the dark in a way that belongs to old places. Then the sea speaks the long, quiet syllable it says when a tide turns. The word is not a word. It is a note that means enough for now. This is how a hard place does not become a cruel place. Not with speeches, not with banners, with routines that hold, with small mercies that do not advertise themselves, with checks that do not make a fuss, with food that never surprises anyone, with rules that do not flip from one day to the next, with a way of speaking that keeps the air level, with a way of moving that saves strength for moments that need it, with the steady practice of noticing when the thread of a day is fraying and smoothing it before it snaps. The island gathered a reputation the way stone gathers salt, quietly, day after day, until everything tasted of it. Newspapers printed short lines that sounded certain. Officials spoke in even voices and said the walls would hold. Teachers repeated the idea in classrooms where windows showed only rain and rooftops. In shops and at kitchen tables, people nodded and felt their shoulders lower. The island became the end of a sentence that no one wished to finish aloud. The word unescapable spread like mist. It moved without needing names. It did not list locks or charms. It did not boast. It only settled over talk like a thin gray cloth. Parents used it to close stories before bedtime. Clerks used it to end small arguments about risk. Aurors and warders heard it most of all, and they did not smile. They knew that certainty is a tool that must be cleaned each day or it grows dull. They kept cleaning it. They kept their faces plain. Reports left the island in tidy folders. Counts matched. Routines held. Storms came and went. The folders said as much and no more. Far away, readers took the folders as proof that the claim was true. Near the walls, the people who wrote the folders treated each line as a promise that had to be earned again by nightfall. They did not decorate the promise. They did not try to sell it. They only kept. Rumor tried to push against the claim and lost strength. An overheard boast in a back room went thin by morning. A loud story in a pub turned soft by the time it reached the door. The pact in the air helped. The design in the stone helped. Habit helped most of all. Habit turns fear into work. Work turns a long day into a short list. A short list can be finished. Finishing calms a city better than a speech. In the press, the island became a picture made from 3 colors: sea, stone, silence. The picture had no faces. That was helpful to some. It allowed people to believe that danger had been reduced to a clean shape. It allowed them to sleep. Yet a place without faces is not the truth. The staff knew this. They kept their hearts steady by seeing faces and still doing careful work. They learned to carry 2 ideas at once: safety for the many, cost for the few. They walked their routes in weather that did not care about either idea. Ministry statements grew shorter over the years. Shorter felt stronger. A claim that begins with many words can wobble. A claim that ends in 4 words can sound like stone. No one escaped here. The line reached market stalls. It reached school corridors. It reached the edge of jokes that stopped before they started. Fewer questions were asked. Questions are a kind of wind. When the wind drops, sound travels differently. Confidence can be heard at a greater distance than doubt. Inside the walls, the mood stayed practical. Hinge oil, ledger ink, dry socks, a cup of tea that tasted better on the second sip. The sound of a bell that rarely rang. The staff let the outer belief pass over them like weather. They did not take pride from it, and they did not argue with it. They knew that pride is as slippery as ice on a step. They knew that an idea is not a lock. They kept using locks. For people far away, the island became a story of endings. For people near the gates, it remained a story of beginnings. Begin the shift. Begin the shift. Begin the count. Begin the circuit at dawn. Begin the same circuit at dusk. Begin the notes while the kettle thinks about singing. Begin again tomorrow. The word unescapable did not help you start your list. The list helped the word exist. In time, the claim grew so common that it felt like a law of weather, as certain as the turn of a tide, as steady as the low hum of waves under the south wall. When a belief becomes weather, it is easy to forget that it once needed proof. It is easy to forget that proof is not a thing you can store. Proof is a task that expires and must be renewed. The island kept renewing it without speeches. The world kept sleeping. A thought traveled now and then, thin as a thread. If everyone believes a door will never open, does the hand that checks it grow lazy? Some heard the thought and tied a knot in the thread and put it away. Others answered it by checking the door twice. The best answer was the second check. The island taught that lesson daily. It did not teach with words. It taught with wind that could slap a person sideways if they forgot to square their stance. So the whisper that the place could never be escaped settled into public life. It sat on the shelf beside other settled things. Winter follows autumn. Markets open at 9. The island holds. The whisper was not a law. It was a comfort. Comfort can be kind. Comfort can also be careless. On most days it was harmless. On one day it was not. The claim that no one could leave the island met its test in a quiet way. There was no trumpet. There was no storm made for a story. There was only a man who had learned to become something else, and a place that could not quite count what did not think like a man. He had been thin a long time. Thin men can pass through spaces that thick hope cannot. He had been cold a long time. Cold men spend less energy on dreams that waste heat. He held to a thought so small it did not attract attention. Stay alive. Stay unnoticed. Stay ready for a door that was not a door. The pact in the air weighed on thoughts that shine. It did less to thoughts that flicker. A steady, bright plan is easy to see and easy to dim. A plan that is only a habit is harder to eat. He made his mind into habit. Breathe, count, watch. Do not remember the whole of anything. Keep only the thread that ties 1 hour to the next. A thread like that looks like nothing, and nothing can pass in places where something would catch. He learned the map of sound and smell the way an animal learns it, because at times he was an animal, and the island had not been taught to doubt a dog the way it doubted a man. The guards who floated by windows were hunters of joy, not hunters of fur. They tasted the heat of human memory and drew near to drink. A shape with 4 legs and a slow heart carried fewer bright pictures. The hunters drifted past it, the way fog drifts past a post. This was not cunning that made a person laugh later at a clever trick. It was survival stripped to muscle and bone. Hunger helped, which is a hard truth. It narrowed the world to edges and corners. It made a person small in the way of wild things, compact, patient, close to the ground. A body that has no spare warmth, throws no spare signals. A face that has forgotten how to smile attracts less theft from the air. He used these losses as tools. He waited in stillness that looked like absence. He moved in seams the eye skips. He watched the patterns of patrol and the moments when routine leaves a thin gap between one careful act and the next. The island read people well. It read animals less well. The builders had tuned corridors and doors to slow human plans. They had not tuned them to notice a shadow that could flatten and slip. Bars spaced for hands did not think of ribs that could press and turn. Windows that gave a line of weak light did not guess that eyes made for night would judge those lines better. A bowl left at a threshold for a plain task could be moved 1 inch and mean a new path for a patient nose. None of these were magic in the loud sense. They were uses of what the place did not think to count. He did not run. Running belongs to stories told at tables. He reduced noise rather than increased speed. He matched his breath to the slow pulse the walls kept. He matched his steps to the steps of storms that made the whole building hum. He was not a ghost. He was the part of a house that houses forget to watch. The hand that set a latch did not feel him pass because he was not a hand. The eye that checked a mark on a page did not see him move because he moved at the edge of a page where most people do not look. When the moment opened, it looked to others like any other moment. A door closed. A list was put away. A kettle lifted its lid with a small rattle. In that small rattle, 2 roots crossed and made a space as wide as a held breath. A thin body flowed through the space the way water finds a crack. The sea air outside struck like a new taste. The hunters did not surge. They were attentive to joy and to terror. He carried neither. He carried practice. Practice is tasteless. He stepped into fog, and the fog welcomed him as one more gray thing. The water was death for most. For a dog, it was a track. The currents that press in strange lines carry scents and salt in patterns a nose can read. He rode those seams like a creature who had not learned how to stand upright. Cold punished him. Cold also kept him small in the sight of those who read warmth. He did not think of destination in a grand way. He thought of shore in the most literal sense, something not water, something not wind, something that allowed weight to rest and lungs to work. By the time anyone far away spoke the word escape, he was already only a rumor on the mainland, a shape seen near bins, a scrap of fur on a hedge. A story told by a child who thought a large stray had looked at them with a human steadiness. The island did not crack. The island did not fall. One man had not beaten a fortress with a banner and a shout. He had slipped, thin as a thread through cloth. The cloth held. The thread was gone. The folders crossed desks with calm faces. Reviews began. Fingers traced routes and timings. Voices stayed level. Pride bent its head and learned new manners. Doors were checked. Spaces between practices were narrowed until they touched. The word unescapable was put in a drawer, and the drawer was labeled with a date. The claim could be used again only after work rebuilt it. This was a good lesson hidden inside a bad day. The staff did not repeat the lesson with scorn. They repeated it with oil on hinges and better maps of hours. Far from the island, loud talkers turned the story into noise. Near the walls, people made small changes and folded them into habit. The air did not warm. The pact did not loosen. The sea kept its beat. The island went on with its dull, honest craft. Yet somewhere in that craft, a new sentence had been added to the private book that steady people carry in their heads. No place is perfect. No system is complete. Certainty must be earned again tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. Still, the man with two shapes was gone. The gap he used was taught to close. The ties between tasks were pulled tighter. The count learned a new pause and a new check before it moved on. The belief that had settled like mist lifted a little. In its place came respect for the small things that keep danger from becoming drama. Respect is better than belief. Respect works when mist does not. The island faced itself. The folders crossed desks in even stacks. The people who had kept their pride trimmed now trimmed it shorter. No one spoke in grand tones. They spoke in lists. They spoke in times. They spoke in doors and keys and hands and habits. The escape had been a thread. The cloth was still strong. Yet a single thread is enough to start careful thought. Reviews began in quiet rooms. The first rule was no blame in the voice. The second rule was no hurry in the hand. Those rules kept minds clear. A map of hours was drawn in pencil. The pencil moved across the day. The pencil paused where two tasks touched and left a breath of space. That breath became a mark. The mark became a note. The note became a change in the order of steps. Small work, honest work, the kind of work that makes the next day better. Each door was looked at as if it had just been hung. Bars were measured again. Hinges were felt with the palm. The hand knew things the eye missed. Latches were turned while the wrist listened. Locks were cycled until the sound said yes in a tone everyone trusted. The space between checks was shortened. The gap between routes was tied shut. The habit of 2 eyes on each number was renewed. These were not statements. These were motions. The motions knit the place tighter. Questions were asked that no one had bothered to ask in years. Where does the sound of the dock bell vanish when fog rises? How long does the kettle rattle before the lid settles? Which stair eats the step of a light body when wind presses from the east? What time does the south wall hum at its lowest note? None of these are dramatic questions. All of them lean toward truth. A place reveals its seams in such answers. A place becomes safer when its keepers love such small truths. Law staff learned the map of air. They learned which turns steal speed without stealing sight. They learned which windows make a watcher taller in the mind of a person who might test a line. They learned where to stand to hear 2 corridors at once. They learned how fog turns a strong voice into a weak one, and how a hand sign can cross a yard when a shout cannot. They learned again that a routine is not a chain. It is a rope. A rope can be retied with better knot. A calm embarrassment moved through the ministry. It was not loud. It was useful. It made people read rather than skim. It made meetings shorter and sharper. It made the sentence that had sounded like stone lose its echo. In its place came sentences that work. The island holds when the island is kept in order. The island is kept in order when people do the work. The work is done when lists are neat and bodies are steady and eyes are honest. Short sentences. True one. Supplies were checked with the same care as locks. Oil that met salt without turning to gum. Cloth that could keep damp off paper. Rope that did not swell and stick in rings. Boots that held a step on wet stone. Cups that kept tea hot long enough to matter and did not break when a long night asked for a second pour. Any weakness in tools becomes a weakness in walls. The island refuses weak tools. It has earned the right to refuse them. The pack in the air was weighed as well. Limits were read with a colder eye. Paths were redrawn, so that human warmth could be kept where it best repairs people who must work long shifts. The borders were walked at dawn, and at dusk, where a border had drifted, it was nudged back by hands and by charms that do not bite. The goal was simple: protect without starving, guard without flooding, keep the harvest in the lane that had been bargained, keep the rest of life in lanes where it could still breathe. Training changed its tone. Not new banners, new drills. The Count added a pause in 3 places. The pause held long enough to hear what hurry hides. A second route to each point was practiced, and the reasons for the second route were written down in plain words. A room of quiet warmth was set as a hinge in the middle of a hard night. People stepped in by schedule, not by pride. Pride does not keep a door shut. Rest does. The island taught that again, and the lesson stayed. Records grew more useful. Not thicker, better. A line asked not only what happened, but what almost happened. A column held not only the time, but the temperature of the air, and the wind, and the sound from the south wall. These notes did not decorate the page. They warned the next person who would stand in the same place with the same key. A good record is a hand on a shoulder from a worker you may never meet. It says, stand here, not there. It says, listen now, not later. It says, you are not alone in this task. Public talk swelled and then thinned, as public talk does. Far away, people argued over whether the island had failed. Near the gates, people said less and did more. The island does not answer to argument. It answers to weather and to work. The staff tightened lines and softened voices. They let the dull parts of the job be dull, because dull is strong. They saved drama for stories told by others. They saved their energy for doors and lists and eyes that notice what most eyes miss. Doubt visited and stayed a while. Doubt can be a friend when it stays in the right room. It belongs at the desk where checks are planned. It does not belong in the hand that must turn a key with confidence. The island learned to seat doubt at the desk and give it paper. Doubt wrote questions. Questions turned into trials. Trials turned into better paths. Then the key turned with the right weight, and the voice at the count held steady, and the night walked forward without breaking stride. The belief that nothing could go wrong was folded away. In its place stood respect for work done well and for work that must be done again tomorrow. Respect is quieter. It is safer. It makes a person oil a hinge without waiting to be told. It makes a person read a line twice before signing. It makes a person hold the handle of a mug with both hands for 1 extra second and feel heat return to the fingers. These are small acts. They hold a world together. No speeches were carved into stone to mark the review. There was no day set aside for pride. There were only new routes, new pauses, better tools, tighter books, warmer rooms for tired people, and cooler heads when the wind grew sharp. The island measured itself against its own standards and raised them by one notch. The sea did not notice. The stone noticed in its way. The low hum came at the right hour. The walls kept their breath slow. The doors kept their answers ready. The world accepted the quiet acclaim. The place would hold because people would hold it. This promise asks for attention each day. It asks for care that does not hope for applause. It asks for steady minds and steady hands and the will to keep small things from turning into large ones. The island knows how to ask for this. The island also knows how to thank those who give it. It thanks them with ordinary days and with nights when sleep arrives on time. The folders showed a pattern of days that matched. Names answered, doors closed, counts settled. Then a small change appeared. A young name that had sounded thin at the back of the list went quiet. The page did not shout. It only left a space that felt wrong to the hand that turned it. A space can tell a whole story. This story began far from the island and closer to a fine house where rules were spoken in voices that never rose. There was a family that prized order more than breath. They believed that a straight line could fix any bend in the world. Their line had been broken by their own child. Shame tightened their mouths. Duty tightened their calendar. Love was present and twisted into duty until the two could not be told apart. In a quiet room, a plan was spoken in sentences with few words. The plan was simple in shape and heavy in cost. Trade one life for another. Trade a young future for a long illness that would not be recorded as such. Trade the truth on a page for a truth kept behind eyes that would not sleep well again. On the island, the day of the trade looked like any other day. A visit was approved. Papers were tidy. The weather kept close to the stone and watched. The staff moved with the calm that hard places teach. Two figures arrived with faces set to the same key. One was thin from more than sickness. One was pale from more than fear. A cup was lifted. The exchange began in small sips that tasted of metal and decision. The guards in the air were no good at reading blood ties. They tasted only the warmth of hope and the warmth of dread. Both were present. Both were thin. The hours that followed moved in a practiced line. The island held to its steps. The visitors held to their plan. Out went a figure wrapped against weather and time. Instead, a figure wrapped against the same. The difference sat inside the skin and inside the voice. The difference was hidden by craft that used the rules of magic, like cloth uses thread. The guards who fed on joy noticed little. There was not much joy to eat. The staff who watched for human signs noticed what could be noticed. The dates on the paper, the weight as a body passed between posts, the number that matched the door. Numbers tell their own truth. On that day, the numbers agreed with the plan and not with the world. Days stacked. The young name on the list was crossed through in a clean hand. The cause was recorded in the simple word that ends many stories. The true carrier of the name lay in a bed far from walls and sea. A slow illness was tended at a rate that was not a rate at all. Another person sat the sentence that the world believed was being served by the young. This was a bargain tighter than the pack that kept the island cold. It was made by three people who believed they had no other route left. It was held by silence that did not crack. In houses far away, people said that justice had been done. They read the line in the paper that told of a life ended, and they set down their cups with steady hands. On the island, the staff learned the lesson that numbers hold only what they are told to hold. So they added a habit that does not live on paper. They added the habit of feeling the truth of a person as they pass a door. The way a shoulder holds weight, the way a gaze rests, the way a set of steps learns a corridor. None of these can be forged for long. All of these can be missed when pride is high or when sorrow is used as a cloak. The family paid for their plan in private coin. A parent who chose duty over breath lost both. Another who chose love over law found that love without law grows cold in the night. The child who left the island did not return to a life that could be called clean. Freedom gained by masks teaches a person to live behind glass. The days that followed were not days of peace. They were days of hiding and of waiting for a knock that came with every breeze. A life bought with a trade carries the price in every room it enters. For the island, the tale became a caution that traveled by hand rather than by voice. The staff who signed for visits learned to weigh more than ink. They learned to notice when two faces share more than a family line. They learned to watch the way grief breathes. Some breathe like the sea in winter, long and low and heavy. Some breathe like actors who fear a forgotten cue, short and bright and wrong for the room. This was not suspicion without cause. It was care for a door that must answer to more than paper. The pact in the air could not judge what had been done. It only drew more warmth from the rooms that had less to give. The quiet got quieter. The tea needed 2 sips, and then a third before taste returned. The walls did not take sides. Stone does not. The sea did not tell on anyone. The sea holds all secrets and keeps them all the same. The island carried the event as another layer in its weather. The staff carried it as another layer in their crown. When the truth rose years later, the pages were read again with a new light. A gap was seen where before there had been only neat ink. The neatness had been the problem. A perfect line can be the most dangerous lie. The review added a new column to the ledger, not for blame, for conditions. Who travels together? What knowledge of each other is claimed? What details match a shared past that is told without reaching? How a voice keeps or loses its shape after an hour within the walls. The column asked for simple marks. The right marks kept the day simple. The wrong marks asked for a second check done in a room with better light. The world outside held a short debate and then moved on. People prefer stories of clever escapes to stories of quiet trades in quiet rooms. The island did not move on. It kept the change. It kept the habit of reading a person as well as a page. The habit did not accuse. It did not humiliate. It simply refused to let love or shame stand in for law within a corridor where law must be served by plain steps and by doors that return a sound a person can trust. The boy who vanished from the roll became a lesson with no names attached. A lesson about what paper can and cannot hold. A lesson about how far a parent will walk for a child and how far a child can drift when helped to drift. A lesson about how a fortress must answer not only to storms, but also to whispers that use family as a key. The staff told the lesson to new workers with calm voices. They poured tea. They pointed to hinges and to ledgers and to small rooms where a person can be warmed back to the truth. They said only this: count people, not shadows. Count hours, not stories. Hold your own heat, then hold the door. Some prisoners came with their spines set like bars. They did not beg. They did not bargain. They wore their choices like uniforms that could not be taken away by keys or ropes or cold air. They believed that the world had a right shape and that they belonged to the hand that pressed it into that shape. In the first days, they stared past walls as if the island were a narrow delay. In the later days, they stared at the stone itself and seemed to like the way it did not answer back. Oath keepers changed the air, not by noise, by weight. A person who still argues pulls at their chain in one direction and then another. A person who holds a vow does not pull. They stand. The gods in the air found such people easy to read and easy to feed from. The joy in these cells was a small, hard knot. The fear was thin. The steadiness was thick. The harvest was steady and cold. The pact did its work and did not finish the job. Oaths are not bright. They are dense. The island learned to live with that density. The routines bent and then held. Counts paused a moment longer at the doors of those who spoke like sermons. Voices stayed calm. The list stayed neat. The kitchen kept its times. Discipline stayed measured. The island refused to mirror the heat of any creed. If a man called the world weak, the island answered with a mug of plain tea. If a woman spoke of victory as if it were a living thing, the island answered with a door that closed, and a day that repeated, and a night that arrived on time with no triumph in it. Nothing exotic, only order. Oath keepers taught the staff another craft. They taught them to hear meaning in silence. When a person who loves power goes quiet, the quiet has teeth. It bites in the wrong places. It tries make shapes on its own. The staff learned to sit in that quiet and not move. They learned to hold a room steady the way a sailor holds a tiller. When a gust tries to jerk it, they kept their feet under them. They kept their shoulders loose. They let the creed wear itself out against stone. Sometimes a mouth opened and poured out lines that had been polished for years. The lines were full of hard words and thin mercy. The island did not answer with arguments. No debate under this sky ever changed a vow. The island answered with simple facts that do not accept applause. Your name, your number, your meal, your hour in the yard, the count, the lamp, the door. A sermon finds no purchase on a list like that. Bit by bit, the pace of the place ate the rhythm of the speech. The voice grew shorter. The eyes learned the map of the corridor. The feet learned the turn at the step that steals speed. The grand shape of the vow stayed, but it had to live inside the common shape of a day. Some keepers try to use their vows as shields for others. They spoke for people in nearby cells. They tried to turn lines in the day to their own pattern with shared looks and timed coughs and small codes made from ordinary acts. The staff knew codes before codes were made. They watched the small changes in breath at the count. They watched where eyes rested when a latch lifted. They watched which cup was always set down half an inch from the same crack in the shelf. They pulled on those threads with light fingers. A code broken quietly does not create a story. It creates a pause and a correction and a day that refuses to be bent. There were nights when the island felt like a chapel without candles, cold and sure, music only in the sea. The Oath Keepers liked those nights more than they liked fog or sun. They believed stillness meant strength. The staff believed stillness meant the checks were working. The same night held two truths and did not argue about them. That is the way of strong places. They do not rush to settle every thought. They settle the work instead. The pact in the air did not care for ideas. It drained warmth where it found it, and where there was anger, without joy, it made a different kind of emptiness. Oath keepers who lived on rage found that rage cooled into gravel, hard, tasteless, heavy. They tried to lift it and found it was only a weight, not a fire. Some learned to sit it down. Some tried to lift it each morning until their hands shook. The island counted both kinds with the same pencil. The island was not in the business of conversion. The island was in the business of reducing harm. Letters gave the only cracks. A few arrived with words that did not sound like slogans. A child wrote of a loose hinge on a garden gate. A parent wrote of heavy rain and a jam jar that would not open. Small words. They dropped into the dense rooms like pebbles into a well. The sound they made was not loud. It was clean. Even people who loved creed more than wind know the shape of a jam jar. Even they remember a hinge. Some folded the paper and hid it under a thin mattress and refused to look again. Some read the line about the hinge 3 times and their breath changed with each reading. The island did not cheer either choice. It only kept time. Visits came less often for oath keepers. When they came, they were as plain as all other visits. Chairs that did not scrape, panes that did not fog, if a sleeve was used in a certain way, words that were measured and watched, not for content alone, but for the effect on the air in the hour after. A person who left a visit with a spine like a spear was given a longer lane to walk until the spine turned back into a back. A person who left with the tremor of a simple grief was offered a warmer chair in the small room where the lamp has the good light. Warmth is a medicine. It does not change vows. It makes the next hour safe. The island also learned which staff to place near which doors. Some voices make creeds worse. Some make them smaller. A steady voice with no taste for drama is the right tool for a hard job. A person who can say good morning and make it mean only the time of day is a ward stronger than iron. They do not insult a belief. They do not feed it. They move the day forward by an inch and then by another inch until the count settles and the key turns and the hour is done. The wall thanks such people. The world ought to thank them as well. In the records, the oath keepers are a line like any other line. Age, height, date, condition. The real record is in the way the staff carry themselves near those doors. The grip on a mug, the way a hand checks a latch twice, the way 2 sets of eyes agree on a pause and then move on. The island is full of these tiny signatures. They are the script that does not sit on paper. They are the reason a place with hard people in it can stay a place with small mercies in it too. Years passed like waves. Oath keepers arrived. Oath keepers left by time or by orders written far away. The stone did not learn their creeds. The stone learned their weight. The sea did not repeat their phrases. The sea repeated its own. The island held steady between them. It kept the day plain. It kept the night quiet. It kept the door shut without hate. That is the task. That is enough for a place that stands so others can sleep. It began like any other winter night. The air pressed close to the stone. The sea spoke in its low voice. Fog drifted in out of the yard as if the island were breathing. Lamps were trimmed to the same small bowls of light. The count was read in the calm key that had been taught to every mouth. The answers came back in order. The books were closed. A walk was made along the rails that shine where hands must rest. The people on duty wore their layers and kept their faces plain. The pact lay over everything like frost that does not melt. Beneath this even surface, timings that had never met began to glance off one another. A cart rattled half a minute late. A lid on a kettle took 1 breath longer to settle. A gust held its shape at a corner. That is usually safe. Small things, none of them sharp on their own. Together they widened one seam. A seam is a place where two honest habits leave a gap so thin it seems like nothing. Nothing is often enough. In one corridor, a latch paused on an old habit. In a second corridor, a hand with a key was held back by fog that blurred the next 3 feet. A bell did not ring, because the island does not begin with bells. It begins with people finishing their listed tasks in the right order. The right order wavered. Not because anyone was careless, because weather has moods and routines ride on weather. In that thin wavering, doors that had always waited for the same beat were asked to wait for a new one. A patient ear might have heard the island try to retune itself. A low note reached for the next low note and found it just to the side. Several minds inside the walls had learned to listen for such shifts. The minds did not belong to planners with pencils. They belonged to people who had spent many days measuring the island by breath and by boot and by the quiet of long hours. When the beat changed, those minds changed with it. A cough that had been a name became a signal. A scrape that had been a habit became a step. A silence that had been a blank became a pass. None of it was dramatic. Drama wastes strength. This was thrift applied to motion. A door opened that would have opened anyway. It opened half a beat earlier. A second door was asked to close. It did close. The bar fell. The sound reached a watcher whose ear was full of fog. The sound arrived muffled and late. The watcher waited for the echo that confirms the right weight on the bar. The echo did not come. The watcher checked again. But the check had to wait for a sleeve to be pulled down and for 2 breaths to warm a palm enough to feel iron without losing skin. In that delay, one more hinge turned on a different rhythm. One more step slid where it had not planned to slide. The pattern grew. There were no shouts. There were hands that moved with the steadiness of those who had practiced 24 times in a yard without witnesses. A face looked at a face for half a second too long, and then looked away. Looking away was the signal. The signal matched the fog. The fog matched the sea. The sea matched the hum of the south wall. The island is not an ally to any plan. It is a setting. Yet settings can be used when they have been studied with patience and with hunger. The pact made the air heavy and level. It turned bright ideas into dull stones. It did not erase coordination that had been learned by repetition. A person who wants to run cannot run under such air. A person who wants only to keep a small shape the size of a doorway may keep it. The shape was kept. The doorway came. A bar lifted in one place, while another bar stayed down in another place. The lift and the stay met like 2 notes that cancel and make quiet. In quiet, a shadow moved from one line to another. Across the island, more than one cell felt that shift. None of the movements were clean. Bodies that have lived long in gray air do not jump. They fold and unfold. They leak through spaces like cold finding cracks. Hands that have forgotten quickness remember it as a list. First this, then this. Now the breath, now the step, now the turn. Doors were not flung. They were nudged. Chains were not thrown. They were eased. The plan was not masterful. It was sufficient. The staff did not sleep through this. Those on duty felt the wrongness at the same time the wrongness can. A room feels different when the net that holds it is being tugged at. 3 points. The tea goes flat in the mouth. The pencil feels heavy. The ledger asks for a page that is not ready. The body knows before the numbers admit it. People moved. They did not run. Running breaks ankles and minds. They took the second route to 3 places at once. They used hands instead of voices where fog takes voices. They checked corners where wind can sound like a step. They found steps. An alarm is a last tool here. First comes correction by craft. Several doors were found with bars that had sat without complaint for years, and now asked for oil and firmness. Several locks had been asked to turn with breath blown into the keyholes by mouths that still remembered mischief from younger days. Rust does not open for breath. Oil and a steady wrist opened it back to the shape it should hold. In two places, the thin seam that had been widened was pinched shut by people standing where wind and sight meet. One person stands where a plan expects a gap, and the plan loses its shape. Not all routes were caught in time. Several figures reached the lanes between walls and sea. These lanes are narrow and slippery. They are lines that belong to storms more than to people. The pact noticed motion there and slid toward it, though even that slide was slow, because the pact moves as weather moves. The figures used the same thrift that had kept them alive inside. They did not sprint, they counted. A wave lifts, a foot sets, a wave falls, a hand finds a seam. The cold punished them. Cold often decides more than cleverness does. Water took what water takes. Stone bruised what stone bruises. Some made it to the next hinge in the island, where a set of steps can be read in the dark. Some did not. On the inland side, boats sat under lines that had been tied by hands that do not drink on duty. The boats might as well have been carved from the same stone as the walls. The staff at the dock knew the sound that a bad night makes on water. They did not wait for orders. They took steps that had been drilled without drama. Lines were thrown. A light was raised to a level that does not blind those behind it. Two voices called and then stopped calling when fog made calling worse than quiet. A shape in the water became a coat on a hook and a weight on a bench and a new line in a book. Inside the walls, counts were done that broke and were done again. A count that breaks is not a failure. It is a line that asks to be drawn twice with a better pen. The second drawing held. Doors that had shifted were made to sit straight. The corridor that eats the step of a light body when the wind comes from the east was held by a heavier body that knew how to stand. Codes were pulled apart and dropped back as plain things. A cough became a cough again. A scrape became a scrape again. The night turned from thin to thick. The plan thinned. By dawn, the island had taken back most of what had been taken from it. The fog lifted from the yard and showed faces that had learned a new color of tired. Books opened to fresh pages and recorded the night in lines that would look calm to anyone who had not been there. Calm was earned. Calm belongs to workers more than to rooms. The air kept its weight. The pact had eaten more than usual and left teeth marks in places that would need warmth later. The sea went on as if nothing had happened, which is the way of large waters. They hold all nights as equal. The world learned in daylight what the island had worked through in the dark. There had been a pattern. There had been a test. There had been a breach that did not turn into ruin, because many hands held many small things at once and did not drop any. The talk grew loud, far from the walls. The walls do not answer talk. The walls answer checks. The staff set new pauses. They tied seams tighter. They drew a sharper map of breaths and beats. They slept. Then they woke and did the dull work that keeps sharp nights from coming as often as fierce as they will. They do not look for faces. They do not look for houses or flags or names. They look for weather inside people, warmth that can be thinned, light that can be turned down, a day that can be made to feel far away from itself. They drift along walls and across yards with patience that belongs to deep winter. Their sense is not sight in the way we mean sight. It is a reading of air. It is a tasting of mood. It is hunger taught to move like fog. Joy is loud to them. A laugh carries like a bell in snow. A good memory throws out a heat that curls against stone. They find these and feed. They do not chew. They hush. They press. They draw. After, a room is the same shape, but it has fewer corners where a mind can rest. A person can still stand. They can still walk. They can still answer account with a steady voice. Only the color of time has gone pale. Fear is thin food. It burns fast. A sharp panic is a flare that leaves only smoke. They prefer steadier harvests. A memory that repeats and stays sweet. A small plan that glows like a coal. A true smile that travels up from the chest rather than down from the mouth. They take these first. A place with many such lights becomes dark in a way that clean lamps do not heal. The lamps help hands see keys and pages. They do not warm what these gods have cooled. They do not hate people. Hunger has no respect for hate. Hate is a human weather that wastes strength while giving off little heat that can be used. They are not cruel in the sense of enjoying what they cause. Enjoyment would be a light in itself, and they have none. They are consistent. They find what they were made to find and make less of it. A simple rule repeated across years writes itself into stone and into the people who live near that stone. The pact that placed them here wrote borders in the air, lanes where work could be done without every bright thing being stripped at once, pockets where human warmth could be kept and then carried back like embers cupped in careful hands. The borders are kept by watch and habit. They are not perfect. On bad days, the lines drift like fishing ropes in a tide. On good days, they lie straight and people pass along them and keep more than they lose. A person who must live and work under this weather learns crafts that would sound small in a warm room. They do not waste sweet thoughts. They wrap them. They ration them. A picture of a kitchen window in sun is held for 10 breaths and then put away. A name said kindly is kept like a coin and not spent on a moment that does not need it. A tune is hummed once at the right door, not 6 times along a corridor. Brightness is not denied. It is managed. Some protections are taught and measured and written into handbooks. Calm practices that lift a mind to a level where the drain runs slower. Charms that smooth edges without picking fights. None of these are lights that boast. They are curtains that hold. They give a person privacy inside their own head. They let a worker finish a page and carry a little warmth to the next room. In a hard place, that is a great deal. Other protections are human in the oldest sense. A tea shared in a small room where the air is kinder. Dry socks put on at the exact time the body most needs to remember that it can still choose comfort. A glance between co-workers that says you are seen and that the next line on the list is yours and that you will not hold it alone. A laugh is rare here. When it comes, it is brief and close to the chest. That is enough. One laugh kept small is better than many that would be stolen. They are patient hunters, but they are not clever. A cleverness that bends rules lives in people. These gods follow a simple pull. When work is arranged with that pull in mind, safety grows. Rounds bend where the air is heaviest. Roots cross in places where the harvest is thin. A warm room sits not at the end of a shift, but in the middle where it can do more. The staff do not announce these designs. Announcements are noise. Noise attracts the very appetite they must deny. Prisoners learn their own counterweights. They count in even sets. They keep a small task at hand at all times. A task that has a beginning and an end. Fold, set, arrange, straighten. They choose one memory that is ordinary and strong. A gate that squeaks in a kind way, a corner where late sun sits, and they visit it by rule, not by longing. Longing leaves doors open. Rule closes them in the right places. The memory is touched and then left. It is not pulled to pieces. It is not tested for truth until it breaks. Left whole, it can warm 2 minutes and then another 2 minutes later in the day. There is a story told in distant towns that these guards pick sides in a war, that they wear the colors of whoever will pay them with license to feed. The truth is simpler and colder. They follow supply. They collect where there is most to take and least to stop them taking. A world at peace leaves them thin and wandering. A world in fear fattens them and makes them bold. This does not mean they swear loyalty. It means hunger behaves like hunger. People must be the ones to hold lines and keep seasons from sliding into the kind that make these beings strong. The island keeps its side of the pact by staying exact. Time is marked cleanly. Doors are closed square. Voices stay in the key that tells a mind it is safe to be quiet. The staff do not carry bright lamps inside themselves on duty. They keep steady banked coals. They leave brightness for rooms set aside, and for hours when the ledger is shut. They are not less human for this. They are more careful. Care is a better answer than pride when the air itself has teeth. There are days when the weather presses so hard that even practiced minds feel their edges blur. Those days end with a record and with help given and received without fuss. A chair with real weight is sat in. A heavy blanket stays for a quarter hour. A sweet cup is finished to the bottom. A line is added to a page that says how the air sat and how the walls sounded and how the fog moved at a certain corner. Knowledge is heat for tomorrow. Tomorrow needs heat. If someone asks what these guards want, the shortest answer is the right one. Less of what makes human life bearable. If someone asks how to live near such want without losing shape, the answer is also short and full of work. Keep the day simple. Keep the tools good. Keep the body warm enough and the mind steady enough and the lists neat enough that the world remains arranged. In an arranged world, hunger finds fewer places to open doors. They will always drift here. The pact wrote it so. The sea suits their speed. The stone suits their patience. The gray suits their eyes that are not eyes. Yet they are not the only weather. There is also habit. There is also craft. There is also the quiet agreement among people to carry light, like a careful trade, not a wasteful flare. In that agreement, rooms remain rooms and not only boxes. Names remain names and not only numbers. A day remains a day that begins and ends and holds. Halls of polished wood held long talks. Voices stayed even. Pens moved. The question never changed. How much fear do you allow into policy to keep fear out of streets? The island reduced harm. It also made days colder for those inside, safety for many. Cost for few, the scales never rested for long. Each year added weight to one pan, and then to the other. The balance looked steady from far away. Up close it trembled like a line on water. Numbers were the simple comfort. Counts that matched. Folders that closed. Nights without noise in market lanes. The public read those numbers and slept. The people at the tables knew what numbers do not hold. A chart cannot show the taste of air in a corridor. A graph cannot show the way a person's voice flattens after months under gray weather. So they spoke of limits, of oversight, that was not only a word, of audits that did more than praise the last audit. Some said the pact was the only tool strong enough. They said walls and routines fail when will is wild They said hunger on our side is safer than hunger outside law. Others said a tool that eats what it guards will eat more each year. They said that dread as policy teaches a habit the world will regret. Between these two views sat work. Work asks for neither purity nor surrender. Work asks for schedules that bend toward mercy without letting risk slip through. Ideas for change came in plain clothes. More human eyes at choke points. Warm rooms placed where long shifts cut into steadiness. Pauses added in the count where bad nights like to hide. Letters handled with time enough to do good and not enough to undo a day. Simple charms to thicken the thin air in staff lanes. Nothing grand, many small turns of small screws. Each one made a little space where despair could not enter without being noticed. Trust was the coin that paid for each choice. The public wanted doors shut. They also wanted to think of themselves as kind. The ministry had to hold both wishes. Statements grew careful. Fewer claims of perfect safety. More sentences that sounded like work. The island holds when people hold it. People hold it when they are kept whole. Whole people keep better doors. The words were not music. They were true. Errors were faced without theater. A review spoke in short lines. What happened? What almost happened? What must change before the next tide? Pride was kept low. Blame was kept focused and small. Discipline existed. So did repair. In this way, the place did not swing from harshness to softness and back again. It moved an inch toward better and then held there. Then another inch. The public did not see those inches. They felt them as quiet. There were proposals to pull the pact back by a step. Fewer passers in inner yards. Firmer borders round rooms where staff must gather warmth. Trial weeks without heavy air on certain routes. The aim was not to weaken order. The aim was to learn whether safety came more from fear or from craft. Some trials showed that craft holds more than fear in rooms where people are steady. Other trials showed that fear still carried weight in corners where craft could not reach. Both results were written down without prompt. Letters from far towns arrived in stacks. Some begged for harder lines. Some begged for softer ones. The ministry read them all. A state cannot live by begging letters. It must settle to a way of acting that keeps streets calm and souls unbroken. The way chosen was narrow and slow. It asked for attention every day. It asked for records that could be read by a new hand without loss. It asked for leaders who could speak without thunder and still be believed. The island was given visits by eyes that did not work there. These were not grand tours. They were checks by people who knew stone and wind and books and sleep. They walked at dawn when truth shows in the face. They walked at dusk when errors like to hide. They drank the tea and noticed whether the second sip was better than the first. They read the tone at the last count. They wrote notes that did not try to sound clever. The notes were used. That is what matters. Across these years, the aim did not change. Reduce harm without making hearts hard. Keep doors shut without teaching the world to love shutting doors. The island cannot answer such aims with words. It answers with days that begin and in order. It answers with staff who go home and still know their own names. It answers with records that tell the truth without shame. When those answers hold, policy has done its job. No leader ever found a finish line here. Each one signed a page that would need a new signature next year. That is the nature of work tied to weather and to people. The sea keeps moving. The air keeps its appetite. The world keeps making choices that must be held inside walls. The dilemma remains a companion, not an enemy. Walk with it. Let it keep you from pride. Let it keep you from panic. Keep the day simple. Keep the night calm. There is a measure kept for the edge of what law can bear. It is not a sentence written in large words. It is not a scene made for any crowd. It is a closing of a door that has no handle on the inside. People talk about it as if it were thunder. On the island, it is quiet. The quiet is the point. The quiet is also the fear. The gods who drift like winter do more than cool a room. They can strip a person of the thread that ties thoughts together. Not pain, not blood. A taking away. A mind left breathing without the voice that once lived in it. The world calls this the kiss. The word is wrong in every soft way. There is no affection in it. There is only absence laid down like frost that never lifts. It is rare. The ledgers prove that. Whole seasons pass with none. Years pass with none. It is a tool that sits far back on a high shelf. Dust settles around it. When talk brings it down, many hands must agree. The air in the room cools a little when the talk begins. Even those who would sign do not sign quickly. They look at their own names drawn in neat ink and remember that ink is small and forever at the same time. The reasons written are always short. They never feel big enough for what they are meant to carry. Words cannot carry this. They can only point. The risk is said to be beyond walls. The harm is said to be a tide that will keep rising if a mind remains whole. The promise is safety. The price is the end of a voice that could still say I, even if it said I, to cruel ideas. Between those poles, the room sits without chairs that feel right. The island does not change shape on such a day. That is part of why the fear is steady rather than sharp. Doors still close, square. Counts still settle in the same tone. Tea still needs a second sip to taste like anything. A room is set aside. It has light without glare. It has walls that do not echo. There are no sharp corners. There are no mirrors. The staff move in a key that does not make a mind jump. Every motion is measured for calm and for truth. The figure who will be changed is kept from being a symbol. Names are used only as needed. This is not to hide the act. It is to keep the world from turning it into a banner. Banners make crowds. Crowds make echoes. Echoes feed the very hunger that the pact brought here. So the act is done in a lane that leads nowhere else. The page for the day holds a line for time. It holds a line for witnesses. It holds a line for a check that asks if every other path was walked and walked again. The gods who do this do not celebrate. They do not decide. They follow the pull that made them what they are. They draw close. The room thins. Heat falls from the edges of things. Breath makes no small clouds. The person changes from a shape that held a story into a shape that does not. The body remains. The voice remains in the throat as sound. The eye that chose a step or a word does not remain. The silence that follows is not the silence of sleep. It is the silence of a book with all the pages glued shut. The staff do not look away. Looking away teaches the hands to lie later. They look and they hold the room steady. When it is done, they work. They check the chest. They check the eyes. They say a name once more to see if it answers. It does not. They record. They sigh. The pen feels heavier than it did at the last count. Then they begin the careful tasks that follow. The body must be cared for. The linen must be clean. The air must be warmed for anyone who stood too close for too long. Warmth brings back little, yet it keeps people from sliding. After such a day, the island sounds different. Boots make a rounder note on stone. Hinges seem to ask for oil even when they do not. Teacups sit on tables a little farther from ledgers. Voices soften even more and say fewer words than usual. No one tells a story at the kettle. Stories feel wrong after the end of a voice. People do the next small thing and then the next. Folding, closing, locking, counting. The work makes a floor that holds when ideas do not. There is oversight, not for noise, for honesty. Pages are read by eyes that were not in the room. Reasons are weighed against reasons. If any step was taken because of pride or fear, rather than because of proof, hands are called to account. That calling is simple and firm. The island cannot afford ritual here. It can only afford truth. Truth in short lines. Truth in steady tones. Truth without the lure of being the loudest person in a meeting. The world beyond wants to use the kiss as a point in an argument. Hard men want it sharper, soft men want it gone. The island wants fewer days that ask for it. That wish is not politics, it is craft. A place kept well by hands and by wards and by habits will almost never reach up to that high shelf. A place that lets routines fray will reach and will reach again. So the staff polish hinges and read ledgers and put warm rooms in the right places. They reduce the need by making ordinary days strong. Those who work near such weather need tending. A person who stood in that quiet may not feel their own warmth for hours. They are sent to the heavy chair. The lamp with the good light is turned on. A thicker blanket weights their shoulders. The cup is sweet. A second cup is allowed. A third is not. Too much sugar makes the air feel thin again. A hand rests on a forearm for the length of 10 breaths. No talk. The body will return to itself if the room is patient. In the records, the kiss is a line among lines. Neat, small, final. In the minds of those who keep the place, it is a weight that reminds them why lists matter. Why pauses at the count save more futures than any thunder. Why warm socks in the middle of a long night are not a luxury, but a ward. Why letters should be read in a span that helps and never in a span that harms. Why the pact must be kept inside borders that are checked at dawn and at dusk until the stone itself can recite them. The island returns to its usual weather. The sea keeps its beat. The walls hold their tone. A door shuts and sounds like a door again, and not like a verdict. Work begins on time. The next morning. The second sip of tea is better than the first. A pencil moves. A hinge is oiled. The count is read. The answers come back in order. The day does not announce that it is merciful. It proves it by being ordinary and by ending at the hour printed at the top of the page. Some doors open toward the world again. Not many. Enough to teach a different lesson than the ones written on stone. Papers are signed. Dates are marked. A name that has been a number returns to being a name among other names. The boat moves over gray water. The air tastes wider. The person who sits under a coat does not feel wide. They feel thin at the edges. They hold the coat closed with both hands, as if a wind might still reach through cloth from a place that is now behind them. The first days are full of simple tasks that feel strange. Beds that do not ring when a key turns. Windows that show trees, not walls. Doors that swing on hinges with an ordinary squeak and can be left open without anyone counting. A kettle that boils fast and smells like the tea that houses make. These are not large gifts. They are large to a body that has learned to keep itself small. A person touches a chair and waits for the chair to ask something. It does not. The quiet of ordinary rooms makes hands tighten until the mind remembers that some quiet does not take. Asleep is a new work. The thin sleep of the island had rules. This bed in a warm room breaks those rules. The body expects boots in a corridor and does not hear them. The body expects a voice at a certain hour and does not hear it. The mind tries to help by waking often. Some wake at the size of a drop in a sink. Some wake at the sound of their own breath because the breath feels too loud. They learn to make new rules. 5 breaths, slow before lying down. A lamp that is left low but not dark. A window shade that is half, so dawn can prove itself in time. Over weeks, the body learns that nights can pass without check and still be safe. The learning takes patience and a hand on a shoulder at moments when patience bends. Food tastes like itself again, which can be almost too much at first. Salt is salt, not only sea in the air. Bread is warm and holds a shape that teeth remember. Butter reminds the mouth of a day that has not existed for a while. The first sweet thing after months of thin taste can be a shock, so the wise serve small pieces. A slice no wider than a finger. A spoon that holds only 2 cherries in syrup. The point is not to flood a body that has lived on gray. The point is to let colors return in small squares, like a quilt that is sewn back together at a calm table. Speech comes back like weather. For some it is a drizzle that does not stop. For others it is a few words once each afternoon, then silence, then a few words again. Words that never had to say choice or blame or sentence begin with smaller things. The gate that sticks, the neighbor who plants beans too early, the way rain smells on old stone. These words are safer than the words that sit on the high shelf. They belong to days that can be held without shaking. Over time, a person moves a few heavier words down from the shelf. Not many, enough to make the room theirs. The body remembers turns in corridors and steps that steal speed. It turns too early in streets that do not need such turns. It measures yards that have no walls. A helper walks 1 step away rather than 1 step near. Close feels like pressure. Space feels like respect. The helper does not fill the air with talk. They match their pace to the breath they hear. They point out a bench, not as an order, only as a place that exists if sitting might be better than standing. If the bench is not used, the helper does not show their wish on their face. Care must be felt, not proved. Letters are different now. They do not come through lists and seals. They arrive with stamps that show birds or boats. They carry the hand of a friend rather than the hand of a clerk. Reading them is a task that can be done at a table that holds a bowl of fruit and a mug that can be held without counting. The first reading may feel thin because the mind still lives in the old weather. The second reading lands closer. The third brings a line that opens a chest. A person learns when to read and when to stop. Enough good at once can tip into ache. Good rationed is good kept. Work returns in small jobs that end each day. A broom on a shop floor. A spade in a small garden. A stool by a kettle in a place where people bring packages and need stamps. A table at the back of a library where covers are mended with cloth that knows how to fold. Work that shows its finish helps hands learn trust again. You begin. You work, you stop, you look, and the thing that needed doing is done. No one must check a door to prove it. The door in the mind starts to stay shut on its own. There are moments when the old weather finds the room. A kettle rattles the wrong way. A lamp trims itself with a hiss that sounds like a count. A front door closes with a tone that belongs to stone and not to wood. The person goes still. A breath that had length becomes a series of short ones. Here the people who love them practice their own craft. They keep their voice soft. They do not say it is nothing. Nothing is a word that harms in such minutes. They say, I am here. They say, you know this room. They say the name of the person who is safe to name. They say the day and the hour, and the exact smell in the air, soap, rain, stew, to prove that the present is present. Some who come back were not held long. They step out with more spring. Their nights hold more sleep. Their talk returns faster. Even so, the air of the island leaves a thin frost that takes sun to lift. They find that crowds take more from them than before. They find that they stand at the edge of laughter, as if they are waiting for a turn no one knows to give. They learn where to be when a room fills, not in a corner, not in the middle. At a table that has the wall at the back and the door in sight, the room then feels like a map and not like a question. Help from the ministry can be good when it is quiet. A person with a book and a pencil comes on schedule rather than by surprise. They ask short questions and write short answers. How is sleep? How is food? How is the walk to the shop? They do not ask why long stories. Why is a knot that tightens when pulled? They check that heat is paid and that a pipe in the kitchen is wrapped. They know that a burst on a winter night can push a mind back toward gray. A warm house is policy when policy remembers that people live with bodies. Old friends arrive in pairs rather than in groups. They bring simple things, a plant that keeps green, a loaf that can be cut slowly, a scarf that remembers, softness without shine. They do not ask for the history of days behind walls. They sit near and let talk be about weather and roofs. If a memory comes, they hold it without adding their own. They say thank you and not I. Cannot imagine. Thank you is steady ground. I cannot imagine leaves a person alone again. Some who return do not stay where they lived before. Streets have too many echoes. They go where the sea is a sound they choose and not a sound that chooses them. Or they go where there is no sea at all, where the wind in trees makes a new kind of count. The place is less important than the chance to be the person who decides the walk home. The first time a key turns without anyone watching is a day worth marking in a book that no one else will read. Health takes slow paths. Hands that shook grow steady while tying a knot on a bag of onions. Eyes that stared at nothing learn to rest on faces again because a child tells a joke that is not funny and laughs until someone else must laugh too. A back that learned to stay straight softens in a chair that was bought because it fit and not because it was there. These are not cures. They are proofs that the hard place did not win the last word. There are also days when the room cannot be held. A thought that had been folded begins to unfold. The air thins. The present becomes slippery. The person reaches for a wall that is not there. On such days, the plan is made in advance. The helper knows the bench on the river path that looks over a low weir. Water speaks in a tone that makes thoughts line up. The helper knows the shop where the owner has a back table and a kettle, and no question. The helper knows that the doctor who is clever and kind has a Tuesday hour, and that the door to that office shuts with a noise like wood, not like verdicts. Plans turn panic into work. Work can be when letters are invited from those still inside. The reply is written in a way that gives heat and not just words. No promises are made that cannot be kept. No bright scenes are painted that will be stolen by the pact in the air before the paper is folded. Simple gifts are sent that travel well. A photo of a path under autumn leaves, a pressed sprig of rosemary that still gives its smell, A line that says the kettle is on at 4, if ever 4, returns. People who have come back know how to write such lines because they remember how thin the air can be. Time does its own work in the end. The island returns to being far and cold in the mind. It does not vanish, it becomes part of the weather a person has lived through. Some keep a small practice forever. A counted breath before sleep, a window shade set to half, a walk at the same hour, along the same fence, so the day has a spine. These practices are not chains, they are friendly rails. They help the world stay arranged. In an arranged world, the past cannot push as hard. No book will be written with all the names of those who came back. Their days are not banners, they are kitchens, they are gardens, they are shops that open and close. They are children who grow and tell jokes that are not funny. They are letters that arrive with stamps that show birds or boats. They are people who learn to carry small hope, like coals under the hand, and found that those coals will light a stove if you feed them, and do not blow too hard. That is enough. The hard place does not need to be the last place in the room. Hard places teach two kinds of answers: strength that stands like a wall, cleverness that moves like water. On the island, both are needed. Strength holds doors and keeps lists neat. Cleverness finds small ways to stay warm without breaking rules. It looks like patience. It looks like tidy hands. It looks like a calm face that knows when to breathe and how to breathe. Cleverness accepts the weather instead of arguing with it. The pact presses on bright thoughts until they go dim. So the clever person saves brightness in small jars. 10 breaths on a memory and then the lid goes on. The memory waits on a shelf inside the mind. It is not left open on the table where any draught can touch it. When the hour is thin, the jar opens for a short drink. Then it closes. This is not denial. This is ration. Tools are chosen with the same care. A cup with a thick lip holds heat longer. A blanket folded twice along the long edge makes a better seam at the shoulders. Socks dried under a certain lamp come out warm in the heel, which is where warmth lasts best. Nothing here is magic in the loud sense. It is craft. Craft is what a person does when they refuse to waste what little the day offers. Some keep a private clock that has nothing to do with bells or lists. It is built from small tasks that repeat and can be counted. Stretch the hands, smooth the sheet, touch the sill, read a line, close the eyes for 5 breaths. Each loop makes a ring. 5 rings make an hour. The rings sit around the mind like gentle ribs. Inside them, the heart does not kick so hard. Outside them, the air cannot push as much. Letters can be used well or used in a way that harms. Cleverness chooses the first path. A letter is read 3 times with 3 aims. The first reading is for the facts. The second reading is for the simple feeling it brings. The third reading is to pick one line to keep and to lay the rest down. That line is folded into a pocket like a small square of cloth. A person touches the pocket and does not need to open it each time. The cloth warms by being kept. The paper would be worn thin. Words spoken inside must be chosen with the same care. Some words are like glass. They cut and reflect and leave a person colder. Some words are like wool. They are plain and warm. The clever person speaks more wool than glass. Yes, now, here, thank you. Enough. These words are small fires that no wind can see from the yard. They warm the breath that carries them. They keep the throat from learning only the gray key of the island. A person who has a talent that changes their shape learns to sit that talent down. The air does not love displays. The air notices sparks. The wise keep their sparks low. They use skill as a shield for the mind, and not as a shout. They let the talent teach patience rather than hurry. They study their own habits until the habits are smooth and do not catch on corners. A smooth life moves through hard rooms without tearing. Cleverness learns the map of sound and smell. The kettle tells the hour with a soft hiss, 2 minutes before the lid begins to dance. The south wall hums lower when the tide turns. Boots on the second stair land dull in fog and bright in dry air. None of this is for schemes. It is for steadiness. When the world is known in this way, a person stands easier. Fear shrinks when things have names and weights. Work can be turned into shelter. Folding makes a roof for the mind. Sweeping makes a floor. Washing makes a window. Setting a shelf makes a wall that holds in warmth. The tasks are not grand. They are rooms that you can carry even when you cannot leave the one you are in. When the count arrives, the room is set in order. When the door shuts, the room remains. This is a better answer than empty time. Empty time invites the air to sit down and spread out. The staff practice their own cleverness. They place warmth where it does the most good for the most people. A chair with the right weight in the right corner. A lamp at the height that makes the second sip best. A pause in the count where breath often fails. A hand sign that says wait without sounding like no. They do not tell stories about these small choices. They make them. The island becomes kinder by inches. The inches add up. Cleverness also means knowing when to ask for help. Pride burns hot and makes no light. A short word spoken early keeps a long trouble from forming. I am thin. The room is heavy. The laugh will not rise today. These are not confessions. They are tools. Two people share a line and it holds twice the weight. A cup poured by one hand tastes warmer to the other. The pact is not broken by this. It is met with better work. Some craft sits in the body. Hands learn to rest open on the knees so that the jaw loosens. Shoulders learn to drop at each door so the sound of the latch does not live in the ribs. Eyes learn to land on a straight edge when the mind starts to tilt. The mouth learns to put breath out longer than it draws breath in. The longer out breath tells the heart that a chase is not on. The heart believes this. It slows. The head thanks the heart. There is a way to hold anger so it keeps a person warm without burning their hands. It is held small. It is wrapped in a task. Write the line straight. Oil the hinge right. Count to the very end of the count even when the last number feels far. Anger then becomes a handle. The handle turns work that needs turning. When the turn is done, the anger is set down. It is not spread on other people like cold rain. Cleverness keeps hope close to the ground. Not tomorrow, I will fly. Rather, tomorrow I will stand on the same square and feel it hold. Tomorrow I will drink the second sip and feel it taste more than the first. Tomorrow I will hear the low note from the wall and it will tell me the tide has turned and I am still here. These are small hopes. They survive the air. They make stronger ones possible later. The island rewards patient craft and punishes hurry. People who belong to it learn the rule and teach it on in quiet ways. A newcomer is shown where the wind takes words. They are shown the 3 steps that are always slick. They are shown the shelf where dry socks wait. They are told why the book must be written in that hand and not another. They are told why a pause belongs in a certain doorway. They are told nothing that will make them big. They are given what will keep them whole. Cleverness is not a trick here. It is a way to be kind to a future self. It is the folded cup that makes the second sip good. It is the match in a dry pocket. It is the habit that makes the bed ready for the next body that must use it. It is the extra line in the ledger that tells the next hand what the air felt like at dusk. It is the memory put away with care so it can live to warm another cold hour. The cold remains, the pact remains. The sea keeps its voice. Yet the day can be made workable by hands that notice and by minds that use what they notice in plain ways. A person who learns this does not beat the island. They meet it. Meeting is enough. Meeting keeps shape. Meeting lets sleep come when the page says it should. Conflict changes every place it touches. On the island, it did not bring banners or speeches. It brought more names in tighter lines. It brought orders that arrived faster than the sea could turn. It brought faces set in a key that says not later, now. The stone was the same. The air was the same. The work had to carry more weight on the same rails. Policy hardened in small ways first. Pauses grew shorter. Counts grew more often. Doors were checked again between checks that used to be enough. The records room took on an edge like winter. Ink dried faster because pages turned faster. A day that had once held a steady number of tasks now held the same tasks pressed close together. The craft did not change. The pace did. Arrivals came in weather that did not wait for kindness. Boats touched the dock with a thud that told the rails to be ready. Names were read in voices that held no room for flair. The kitchen pushed heat into plain food without losing the schedule that keeps people upright. The staff house smelled more strongly of lamp oil and wet wool. Coats dried over lines that were never empty. The kettle sang and was poured and was filled again. Tea became a hinge that could not be allowed to fail. Wartime shifts the kinds of cases a place must hold. Some arrived with eyes that still looked for an argument. Some arrived with eyes that stared past walls toward some idea of victory. Some arrived so tired that the pact barely noticed them at first. The island does not sort souls by creed, it sorts by need. Where speed would break a person, the day bent to carry them. Where defiance might reach for a gap, the day set firmer lines. Mercy and caution walked beside each other and did not fight. They had no time to fight. Letters changed. Fewer reached the rooms inside. The ones that did often carried short lines and heavy news. Names of streets, names of days. A sentence about smoke where smoke does not belong. Staff read the air after each delivery. If a line opened a wound, warmth was set near the person who had to carry that line. If a line steadied a back, the room was left to hold that steady without interruption. Mail became a kind of medicine, sometimes strong, sometimes thin, always handled like a live coal. The pact thickened. Hunger always rises when the world grows afraid. The guards that drift like winter pressed closer to the walls and windows. The staff answered by tightening borders that had drifted. Warm rooms were used by schedule rather than by pride. A person stepped in before they went thin. A person stepped out before the room was stripped dry. These were simple rules. Kept simple, they worked while the weather strained every edge. Training took on a new tone, not louder, tighter. Drills repeated until hands moved before minds had finished forming the thought. 2 routes to each hinge, 2 names on each book, 2 ways to send a message when fog eats voices. Practice ran in rain so that practice would not fail in rain. Practice ran at dawn and at dusk so that errors could be seen in both lights. People learned to hold their heat like a banked coal and to leave brightness for hours when brightness would not be stolen. Discipline stayed measured. In fear, harshness tempts. The island refused that temptation. A rule kept in the same tone on Monday, and on the worst Wednesday builds more safety than a shout that comes and goes. A person who crossed a line met the same line they would have met in quiet years. The line was not moved closer out of anger. It was not moved farther out of pity. It was held. Holding is harder work than moving. The staff did the harder work. Intake overflow is a test of systems. The island answered with order. Records were trimmed to what matters most when minutes are short. Name, time, door, condition. Any note that saves the next hand an extra look. The long comments that belong to slow months were set aside. Truth in short lines traveled faster. The day stayed arranged. An arranged day resists panic better than a brave speech. Rumors pressed at the outer world like wind on shutters. Breaks predicted. Masses imagined. The island did not listen to rumor. It listened to hinges. It listened to the low note of the south wall. It listened to boots on the second stair that eats a light step in a certain wind. Those sounds told the truth a person can use. They said where to stand. They said when to pause. They said when to send a runner, and when a hand sign will move a plan faster. Wartime also changes exits. Fewer doors open toward the world again. The few that did open were handled with more care than before. A person leaving needed a plan laid like a path of stones. Heat at home, food that can be tasted after gray months, a voice to meet them at the dock that says the right small words. The right small words are not speeches. Welcome home. Sit. Tea. Then silence that does not push. There were nights when many cells asked to open at once, not by paper, but by pressure. The island felt those nights as a change in the color of the air. Fog grew a weight that did not belong to water alone. The staff answered not with alarm first, but with craft. Roots crossed where roots never cross on quiet days. Bars were touched in a rhythm that tests both ear and wrist. The count paused in the door where the wind steals numbers and was finished one door farther on. The pact pressed harder when bright fear rose, so voices stayed level. Fear cooled. The press lost shape. In the ministry, ledgers filled with lines that looked like victories and like losses. The island sent only the lines it could prove. Noise is cheap in a war. Proof is not. Eyes from outside came to walk the stones in pairs. They checked hinges and listened to the hum and asked when the last oil had touched a lock. They asked how the air sat on a night of heavy fog. They drank tea and said whether the second sip was better than the first. Their notes were read and the useful parts were kept. The staff paid a price and were tended in turn. Shifts ran longer and then were cut back before people broke. The small room with the good lamp stayed open at odd hours. A heavy chair and a sweet cup saved more days than any slogan could. Dry socks were stocked in foolish numbers that turned out to be wise numbers. A hand on a forearm for 10 breaths remained the best tool when a night had opened too many doors inside a person. These are not war stories. They are the work that keeps war from swallowing more than it must. When the storm outside began to ease, the island did not declare a season over. It widened pauses to fit ordinary breath again. It let drills sink back to the tempo that saves strength for real nights. It kept the small changes that had proven themselves under pressure. 2 names on a book, a warmer chair at the hinge hour, a count that listens as well as reads. It set aside the parts that belonged only to the heaviest weather. It did not rush to call itself the same as before. Places that hold lives should not pretend time leaves no trace. Wartime showed what was always true. Safety here comes from dull excellence, from lists read right, from hinges that do not surprise, from people who speak in a key that steadies rooms, from mercy measured in cups and chairs and minutes, not in speeches, from borders that keep hunger in its lane and leave enough warmth for human work to go on. The island held because hands held it. Hands held it because craft was taught and kept and passed along without pride. When the heaviest weather passed, the world spoke in lower voices. Streets felt wider. Windows opened more often. The island did not change overnight. It never does. Change came as small questions asked in rooms without thunder. What belongs going forward? What can be set down? What must be rebuilt with gentler hands, so that it will hold without biting? Calls for reform arrived like steady rain. Not a flood, a long pattern that sinks into stone. Fewer promises of perfection, more plans that looked like work. The pact was read again, line by line. Borders were redrawn so they did not creep in bad seasons. Warm lanes were protected as part of policy, not as favors. Human eyes were placed where engines cannot see, and human rest was guarded, so those eyes would remain clear. Audits returned in plainer clothes. They checked what time can erase. Paint that tells the foot where to fall. Rails that keep hands when wind pulls. Records that say more than numbers say. Oversight stopped being a visit for show and became a practice with a calendar. Dawn walks, dusk walks, notes that fit in pockets and mean something when storms rise again. No speech carved in stone, only small signatures in many hands. Inside, the shape of days eased by inches. Counts kept their pauses where sense had proven they belong. The last cup at night stayed sweet, and the sweet was not cut in lean weeks. Staff lanes held their warmth without apology. Teaching shifted from rules to craft, from chant to check, from pride to patience. A door that shuts is a tool. A person who shuts it must be kept whole, or safety thins. Several hard measures were set back on higher shelves. They did not vanish. They became farther from reach. Use only when every other route has been walked twice. Use only with records ready for eyes that were not in the room. Use only with a plan for tending those who had to stand near the weather it makes. This is not softness. It is strength that knows its own cost and pays in full when it must. New hiring favored voices that fit the island, calm, clear, unshaken by noise. Training added seasons of watching before deciding. Hands learned the wall's hum at each tide. Ears learned which fog steals speech and which fog gives it back. Books were written to be read by tired people on hard nights. Short lines, true notes, no pride hidden between commas. Pride breaks under salt. Letters were given more room to do good and less room to harm. Times for reading were set where the day could hold a weight without tipping. Rooms with gentler air were kept open as hinges, not rewards. For visitors, the path was made plain and honest. No theatrics. Chairs that do not scrape, glass that does not haze. Time enough to say real things and not enough to tear people in two. Far away. The public began to trust quieter claims. Not the old word that sounded like weather, a new sentence that sounded like hands. The place will hold, because people will hold it, and people will be kept strong enough to hold. Trust built the way stone dries after rain. Slower than anyone likes, faster than old fear said was possible. The island answered with days that began and ended on time. The borders of the pact were watched as if they were sleeping children, not feared, not ignored. Checked, straightened, kept in their lane. When hunger pressed, craft met it. When craft frayed, rest repaired it. The island learned to speak its needs in simple ways. More socks, better oil, a second pair of eyes at dusk, tea that holds heat long enough for pages that must be read. These requests were not small to those who knew what they saved. Some reforms were invisible to visitors. A pencil moved across a page at the right speed. A latch sat in its seat with the right tone. A count paused for the extra breath that makes the next hour safer. A warm chair was occupied because a schedule said so, not because a person asked. Quiet mercies become strongest when they no longer depend on memory alone. Slowly the place felt less like a clenched fist and more like a steady hand. The work stayed strict. The tone grew kinder. The pact still drifted, but it met borders drawn by people who had measured the cost and were willing to pay only what safety truly needs. See stone wards. And routine learned a new harmony. The low note at the south wall returned to the key that lets a mind rest. The fall of the loudest fear did not end to danger. It taught a better way to carry it. The island became what it was meant to be at its best, a tool held with care, used with restraint, maintained with love for simple excellence. No banner for victories, no drum for grief, only lists read right, doors set true, people kept whole, and nights that end as they should, with the second sip warmer than the first. Change does not always mean new walls. Often it means old doors that learn better manners. The island chose that path. It kept the stone. It kept the lanes. It asked more of hinges and hands. New locks arrived in plain crates. They did not shine. They sat in palms with a weight that felt honest. A lock is a promise made of metal. The promise holds when the hand that uses it is steady. Fittings were done without ceremony. A door was lifted on a quiet morning. The old seat was cleaned until grain showed. The new lock was set true to the line of the latch. Oil that does not gum met iron that does not warp. The bar fell into a pocket that had been measured twice. The sound was round. A good door answers with a note that settles in the ribs. Workers nodded once and wrote the time in a book. Keys changed shape too. Teeth were cut with more care. Rings were damped, so they did not sing on a cold night. Each key learned a place to live when it was off duty. Not a bowl in a corner. A board with numbers and leather ties. A hand does not search there. A hand knows. Fewer lost keys means fewer loud hours. Loud hours feed the wrong weather. Calm saves strength for the moments that need it. The maps of routes were updated in plain lines. 2 ways to every hinge. 2 ways back from every count. Paths crossed at points where 2 sets of eyes can protect a third. Corners that once asked for speed now ask for a pause. Speed slips. A pause holds. Paint on stone told boots where to fall in rain. Rails learned a texture that kept hands even when salt made everything slick. Records were tightened to match the new metal. Not thicker, better. A page now shows how a lock felt as well as if it turned. Tight, easy. Wrong. These words mean something when the same hand writes them each night. The morning hand reads them and can see the door in their head. If the picture feels wrong, they walk at once. A record that moves bodies is the only kind worth the ink. Audits became habits instead of events. Dawn checks on hinges and rails. Dusk checks on keys and counts. A third check each week on the rooms that people use to warm back to themselves. The auditor is a worker with a list, not a stranger with a stare. They write a short note and then fix a small thing before it grows teeth. Audit and repair walk together. Paper alone cannot hold a door. The pact met the new practice without fuss. Borders were redrawn in the same calm hand. Rooms marked for human warmth were wrapped a touch tighter. Lanes where the air must thin were drawn clear, so hunger stayed in its place. When drift was found, the line was set back at once. Not with anger, with a chalk mark and a charm that is plain and strong. The border holds when people agree to hold it every day. Staff training learned the new tones. Hands practiced the new keys until the turn felt like a muscle they had always owned. Ears learned the new sound of a lock that sits right. Eyes learned the way new paint catches a lamp and tells a foot where to land. Voice practice kept the count in the same key as before. A new lock does not need a new voice. A steady voice is the strongest word a room can hear. Visitors noticed the change without being told. Chairs still did not scrape. Glass still stayed clear. Time was still enough to say real things and not enough to tear anything. Only the feel of doors was different. They shut like pages that know their place. They opened like lines that are read and understood. There is comfort in a door that speaks a clear language. Even on an island that refuses comfort as policy, that small comfort makes ours safer. The public heard less and trusted more. This is the right order. Articles that once shouted began to print shorter lines. No claims of perfection, only proofs of practice. A schedule that places 2 pairs of eyes at dusk. A ledger that shows oil and checks and the names of those who stand near the weather for others. Each proof fits in a pocket. Each pocket proof travels farther than a speech. Inside the staff house, the kettle sounded the same. That too was a kind of lock, holding the day its shape. People poured and drank and set the mugs down with the bottoms dry. They spoke less and did more. They found that new metal did not ask them to become new people. It asked them to be the same careful people on a steadier floor. Floors matter. People can only carry so much on their own. In the end, the island felt like itself, only tighter where it had been loose and kinder where it had been thin. Old doors kept their place in the walls. New locks taught them better answers. Hands learned those answers by heart. The sea kept its note. The stone kept its patience. The day began and ended in order. This is how trust is built after storms. Not by promises, by well-set iron, by clean books, by warm rooms that open exactly when they should. Secrecy here is not a curtain pulled across a stage. It is a craft learned from sea and stone. The island hides by being ordinary from far away and strange from near at hand. Approaches that seem straight learn to bend. Lines that look short stretch. A traveler who trusts only eyes will think they have arrived and will find they have not. A traveler who trusts a map will learn that maps tire in salt and mist. The first layer is weather-shaped. Fog rises in lanes that repeat without repeating. It bunches at corners where wind from 2 faces meets. It thins on ridges where stone shrugs the air off its shoulders. Those who belong here know these lanes the way a farmer knows frost pockets in a field. They walk through the paths that hold and they wait where fog is a wall. Strangers walk into a white room and try to make rules from it and find that the rules move like fish. The second layer is sound. The island carries footsteps in ways that mislead a person who does not listen with their wrists as well as their ears. A step taken at the south outer run comes to a watcher as if from the west inner stair. A latch lifted under one arch sounds like rain 3 doors away. The arrangement is not a trick for trick's sake. It is an old house learning how to protect itself. The staff lean their knuckles to stone and read the note. The note says where the weight is and whether it belongs. Light is the third layer. Windows are few and narrow on purpose. They do not promise views. They grant proof of day and of night. The placement of each gives a watcher a lens rather than a picture. A person in a room sees sky and not a route. A person on a route is seen without seeing the seer. At dusk, lamps are set so that the light spills where feet fall and does not spill where fog could turn light into a blind. The island does not glow, it breathes. Clears look simple on paper. In stone they bend by inches. A corridor that seems straight carries a slow turn that steals speed from a body that tries to dash. A stair that seems even asks for a longer foot at 2 steps and a shorter foot at 1. And so a person who does not belong shows themselves by how they stumble. Turns open to positions that favor notice and narrow in places where a crowd would like to gather and cannot. None of this is cruel, it is careful. There are marks no one points out on a tour that does not exist. Tiny knots of work pressed into mortar where 2 climates meet. A line no wider than a thread drawn along the base of a run, where spray climbs in winter. Unseen mouths in the wall that let pressure out when a storm asks too much and would otherwise pry. A bead of oil at an iron seat that is either fresh or not. The quiet script of maintenance says whether secrecy is being kept by pride or by practice. Practice holds, pride does not. Maps brought from the mainland go gray at the edge. Compasses spin near the docks and then grow bored and stop near a bearing that is not a bearing anyone can use. Birds fly straight over the island and then slide sideways as if lanes are marked in the air. On clear days, which are not many, the place looks plain from a distance. The trick is that plainness breeds lazy guesses, and lazy guesses do not survive 2 turns inside the walls. Secrecy is not a glamour here, it is a habit. There are, of course, wards in the old sense, woven into the grain so deep that only those who have rubbed stone smooth with years can point to the joins. They do not fling a stranger backward. They make the stranger walk until they lose interest. They do not hide door. They make doors feel like other doors that lead to work rather than to leave. A person who tries a dozen handles finds they are touching the same handle in a dozen moods, and a mood does not open to a hand that shakes. Storms help. The sea teaches the walls to hew in keys that flatten noise and carry the note that matters. In such weather, shouts fade and steady speech carries. A plan that needs shout fails. A plan that keeps even breath might pass a door, and then it meets the next design, which is distance set just longer than a human hurry can manage. Speed trips, steadiness arrives, and steadiness belongs to those who already have work on the other side of that door. Some secrecy is made of politeness. Signs that would orient a stranger are not posted. Not to taunt, to keep the place from becoming a puzzle that strangers think they can solve. Workers do not gossip to passers-by. There are no passers-by. Movements stay inside lanes built for them. Messages travel by hands that were taught to carry them without adding trace. The island refuses to explain itself to anyone who does not have a job to do, and jobs are assigned in rooms that do not echo. There is a story that the island moves in fog. It does not. The world moves around it. Tides turn boats into poor judges of distance. Wind shifts markers on the water and makes truth look like error. The crew that belong here let the sea show them the right line by how the bow breathes. The crew that do not belong chase a picture and find it was a cloud. Secrecy costs less when nature pays most of the bill. Inside, doors speak a language that the hand learns. A right door has a seat and a wait and a note that say yes. A wrong door says not yet. A wrong door does not shout no, because shouting no teaches trick. A person who must open a wrong door for good reason knows the second word in the language and uses it A small turn before the large one, a pause that listens for a click, a pressure in the heel of the palm that any other hand would not think to try. Language keeps out those who do not care to learn it. When plans are drawn to change a wall or lay a new line, secrecy is part of the design as much as strength. A brace that also blurs sound at a corner where sound carries poorly. A drain that keeps sand from telling a story to a good nose. A gutter that does not lead a trail to a quiet door. Changes are tested in storms and in quiet, at dawn and at dusk, with the packed heavy and with the packed light. If a change helps only on paper, the paper is burned. Paper that cannot be burned becomes a lie. Some rooms are deeper quiet than others, not for hiding, for healing, and for clear thought. Their corners are soft. Their light is patient. The pact is asked to step back a pace out of simple fairness. The doors into such rooms are the most honest of all. They do not play. They require the right hand at the right hour, with the right name written in a book that keeps names safe. Secrecy serves mercy here and remembers what it is for. The island knows it is watched from far shores by lenses and by minds that think they can draw it with lines. It answers by being itself, a rock with lanes, a house that hums, a place where maps fail with dignity and where guessing burns fuel a person cannot spare in cold. The test here is not cleverness alone. It is patience, which most who come to test do not bring. The place holds because it has learned to make impatience go in circles until it admits it is tired. The best proof that the architecture works is not that strangers choose the wrong doors. It is that the right people find the right ones without looking around for applause. A route that carries a tired body in bad weather to the kettle and back. A lane that lets two sets of eyes meet without a word and know what to do. A turn that soothes speed before it harms. These are the maps that matter. They are written each day by boots and by breath, and by hands that keep secrets by doing work well enough that no one far away needs to know how it was done. Letters are thin bridges that hold more weight than they look able to hold. Paper is light. Ink is light. A stamp is light. Yet a folded page can cross cold air and land in a room where the day needs a new color. The island understands this. It keeps letters dry. It hands them across with care. It gives a person time enough to meet what the paper carries, and a chair that does not scrape. Names on the page have a heat that the pack cannot drink all at once. A name said kindly reaches through gray like a hand through water, the shape of a letter from a child. The loop a friend always makes on a certain word, the way an elder spells a name without looking because they have written it for years. These are small signs. They tell the mind that the world outside still remembers the right door to this room. Reading has 3 steps here. First, the eyes take the lines. Then the chest takes the meaning. Then the hands fold the page in a way that promises the words will be waiting later. Some read aloud once, quietly, to give the room a warmer note. Some touch the corner of the page with a finger, as if touching a face. This is not longing in the loud sense. It is memory being kept whole. The staff do not rush this work. They give the room its span. They do not hover. They stand near enough that the floor feels safe. They know the difference between a letter that settles a person and a letter that unsettles a person. If breath shortens, they set a cup down and let the cup be found without a word. If shoulders ease, they step back 1 step so the warmth can hold on its own. Names spoken during counts are different from names in a letter. The count uses names like pegs in a wall. They must hold the day up. Letters use names like lanterns in fog. They must make a place visible to the person who needs to see it. Both kinds are honest. The island keeps both kinds in balance. Too many pegs and life feels like a wall. Too many lanterns and work goes. There are records of names that never reach the rooms. These live in books that are touched by few hands. The hands are steady. They trace lines that join who arrived, who left, who was moved to warmer air, who needed help at dusk. These are not stories, they are proofs that memory is a craft and not only a feeling. A place that holds people must keep such proofs, or it becomes a rumor told by the sea. In the staff house are small drawers that hold moments kept for hard nights. A sketch on scrap paper of a gull that would not leave a rail. A list of jokes that are not very funny, collected because they made one long shift easier. A pressed leaf from a tree on the mainland that turns red in a month the island only knows as gray. These are not official, they are true. They keep the people who keep the place from thinning. Prisoners keep their own museums in the mind. A gate that squeaks in a kind way. A path that bends around a stone where sun rests late. A cupboard that smells of cloves and bread. The trick is to visit without living there. 10 breaths. Then return. Memory used like this is a blanket that warms and does not smother. Memory used without measure becomes a hole a person falls through. Letters that cannot come are replaced with lines that can. Staff write notes that are not lies. Weather, tide. A gull that carried a shell too big for its beak and learned to drop it and try again. The tea is better on the second sip. The lamp was trimmed at the right time. Your name was read and answered. These lines are small and solid. They give the mind places to put weight. Sometimes a name arrives that opens a wound. The air will tell on such a letter. It goes thin around the chair. The person sets the page down too carefully, like a cup with a crack. Here the island answers with warmth that does not argue. A heavier blanket, a longer span in the room with the good lamp. A voice that says the day is still arranged. A breath counted together to remind the body that work and rest still alternate. Names can be misused, shouted as banners, thrown like stones. The island does not allow this use. Names inside these walls are to be spoken in tones that fit a steady place. If a name is used to stir a crowd, the crowd is returned to simple tasks, and the name is set back on the shelf where it belongs, wrapped and safe. This teaches that a person is more than their power to cause noise. Memory is a ledger in 2 inks. One ink holds what must be remembered to keep the day safe. The other ink holds what should be remembered to keep the day human. The first ink writes counts and times and checks and oil. The second ink writes the joke that helped, the letter that steadied, the name that brought breath back to the right depth. Neither book is thick, both are read. When night comes, the letters are put away and the names of the count return. The room grows plain again. The page in the mind is turned to a simple shape, a line in the wall, the edge of a shelf. Sleep arrives more easily when the day ends as it began, in order, yet under that order, the small bright things remain. They are jars with lids set on tight. They wait for the hour when they are needed. Far from the island, people write names on envelopes without knowing how much those names weigh. They are heavy in the best way. They are stones that hold a roof down in wind. They are handles a person can grip when the air tries to take everything that is not tied. A letter is a tool, a kind one. It makes no promises. It cannot keep. It says here is proof that you are held in mind. That proof is enough on many nights. A prison is a mirror that keeps its eyes down. It shows what a people choose when they are afraid. It shows what they choose when they are tired. It shows whether they trust craft more than thunder. It shows how much quiet mercy they will pay for safety. and how much fear they will ask others to carry so that streets can feel calm. This island says that distance was chosen as a tool. Far water, cold stone, routines that do not bend to moods. It says that order was asked to speak more loudly than comfort. It also says that comfort was not erased. Warm rooms were kept where they matter most. Second sips were guarded. Dry socks were stocked as if they were policy. They were policy. The small mercies tell as much as the locks do. A prison speaks of the value placed on patience. Here the people said that patient craft is stronger than sharp spectacle. They oiled hinges. They wrote short lines that moved hands. They trained voices to a steady key and kept that key through fog and through war. They made dull excellence their pride. Pride that is quiet can still be pride. When it is tied to care, it does not break. A prison also speaks of the cost a community will accept in the name of safety. The pact brought cold air that thins bright things. It also brought quiet nights to towns that needed them. The choice carries a weight that cannot be set down just by signing a page. The weight must be carried each day by those who stand under that air. A people who admit this cost and tend those hands say they know what they have asked for, and they are willing to share the price. The way rules are kept speaks of character. If rules harden when fear rises, the island says so, but it also shows whether rules soften again when weather eases, when harsh tools are put back on higher shelves, and when pauses return, and when warm chairs are treated as wards, not favors. A people are saying that they do not mean to live on a war footing forever. That choice is a kind of wisdom. A prison shows what a people do with power that has no applause. Doors must shut. Counts must settle. None of that makes a good headline. If such work stays honest when no one is watching, the mirror returns a gentler face. It shows a trust in crafts that hold up the day without shouting. It shows a belief that safety is a structure of many small parts, and that the smallest parts are made of respect. The treatment of names speaks as well. If names are used to steady a day and to warm a room, not to turn people into banners, the island says that persons remain persons in the minds of those who keep the doors. If letters are guarded like kind tools, the island says that memory is a duty. If records tell the truth without needing drama, the island says that truth will do. A prison can teach the wrong lesson. If a people let it, it can teach that power is easy, that fear is efficient, that the world is best arranged by closing more doors. The island resists that lesson when its keepers live by craft and not by pride, when they count people and not shadows, when they hold the door and also hold their own heat, when they ask to be checked by eyes that do not work here, and then use what those eyes saw. What does this place say at its best? It says that danger can be managed without turning hearts to stone. It says that safety grows from habits that are small and exact. It says that mercy is not a speech, but a cup and a chair and a pause. It says that distance can protect a city, and that care can protect the soul of the people who keep that distance in place. The sea keeps its note. The walls keep their patience. The island will not decide what a people are. It will only answer the hands that touch it. If the hands are steady, and the minds are honest, and the records stay clean, the mirror will show a community that can face fear without becoming it. That is all a strong place can promise. That is more than many places manage. Morning comes as a pale line, where sea meets sky. The island lifts its slow breath. The stone holds the night's cold a little longer, and then lets it go. Gulls circle and choose quiet ledges. The rails shine where hands will rest. The doors wait with their new manners. The day prepares itself with plain tools and steady minds. Mist moves in lanes that the place knows by heart. It lays a soft edge on every corner. It gives the sea the look of wool pulled thin. Sound carries the way it always does here, close and far in the same moment. A latch speaks and a room answers by becoming a room again. The south wall hums at its low note when the first swell reaches the right seam. The hum says begin. Inside, a pencil writes a first line that has been written before. The count is read. The answers return. Books close with the round sound that belongs to clean work. A kettle lifts its lid and settles. Tea is poured. The second sip is better than the first. Boots take the first path, and then the second path. Hinges hold. Locks give the note they were made to give. The pact sits where borders say it may sit. Warm lanes stay warm. Cold lanes stay useful. The sea keeps its color. Slate and silver, and a green that appears only when the wind is from the east. Salt touches everything and is brushed away where it harms and left where it helps. Paint on stone tells feet where to land when rain comes. Marks in mortar pull the wall tight where two seasons meet. Quiet signatures are everywhere if you know how to see them. They are not for show, they are breath. A letter travels across air and arrives dry. A name is spoken kindly, and the room feels its corners again. Work is done with hands that know their measure. Cloth is folded square. A shelf is set straight. A page is read once for sense and once for duty. A chair with real weight waits in the room where the lamp has the good light. A blanket, heavier than the rest, is ready for the hour when it will be needed. These small mercies are the language of the place. Far away, the world moves in larger steps. Here steps stay small, on purpose. Small holds. Small does not tear. Small keeps craft alive when weather asks hard questions. The island answers with the same words it has used for years. Order, care, patience. It adds new words when the time asks for them. Audit that fixes. Order that is checked at dawn and at dusk. Rest that is scheduled and not begged for. None of these words are loud. They are enough. Toward evening, the light thins until the walls are outlines and the sea is all sound. Lamps find their level. The last walk touches each hinge and each rail. The last book closes. The last cup sits clean on a shelf. The count is read in the key that lets a mind sleep. Doors give back their round answer, and the yards grow still. A gull calls once and then keeps its own counsel. The low note comes again from the south wall. It says, a place like this is a promise kept in plain sight and also out of sight, kept by stone and by sea, kept by lists and by hands, kept by people who hold their own heat so they can hold the door. The island does not ask to be forgiven for being what it is. It asks to be tended. It harms less than fear would harm without it. Tended. It teaches that safety is made of quiet inches and not of thunder. Night gathers. The mist thickens and then lifts in slow folds. The air cools to the hour that belongs to sleep. The world beyond the water goes on, with dinners and with lamps in windows. Here the walls rest on their old patience. The pact keeps to its lane. The records wait for morning. The sea says the long word it has said for centuries. The island listens and answers by standing still. This is where we leave it, a rock in cold water with walls on it, a house that hums, a day that begins and ends when the page says it should, a place that shows who we are when we are careful, The sea will move. The stone will hold. The doors will shut and open and shut again. Somewhere far away, someone will sleep easier because of that. That is enough.
Allah, 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 Allah,